minutes after 10, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Do you know, I thought for a moment that I'd got away with it. It has become, I don't know, a tradition in recent years to point out that whenever I go on holiday, particularly if I go away for a fortnight, then rather unexpected and often quite important events, particularly in the world of politics, tend to unfold. And then at the end, am I right, at the end of the first week? So I've been away for 2 weeks, forgive me, it's presumptuous to imagine that you'd be aware of that. There's absolutely no reason why you should be. You may have just stumbled across this radio station by accident, in which case, my goodness me, you lucky, lucky person. So at the end of the first week, I think, we might be okay. I can't really see what's going to happen next week. That could be, we've got a new Prime Minister on the way. Andy Burnham's passage into Downing Street appears now to be untrammelled. Nothing major on the horizon in terms of international affairs. The Craig David Tribute Act that Donald Trump's adventures in Iran quickly became continues. Ceasefire on a Monday, resumption of hostilities on a Tuesday, threats of apocalypse on a Wednesday, warnings of another ceasefire on a Thursday, and then back to bombing each other on a Friday. We're chilled on Sunday. And I couldn't quite see what might actually unfold that would constitute or give you the opportunity to bombard me on my sunbed, my sun lounger, not literally, with the old observation that every time I go away something massive happens. And then up popped Nigel Farage, the irremovable skid mark upon the Y-fronts of British politics for so many years, once again embarking upon a sort of a narrative of bogus victimhood, ludicrous embellishment or disingenuousness or dishonesty, depending on your perspective, and attention-seeking, in a way that even I, as someone who has chronicled his calumnies and wrigglings and slitherings and deceptions fairly tirelessly, even I was slightly taken by surprise by the desperation of last week's events, that ludicrous address in which he claimed, and remember, we're now in a period of purdah, and the purdah comes in twos. There are two P's. For every purdah, there's a paranoia. When we are in a period of purdah with regard to a by-election, I become very paranoid, because even after 20-something years of doing this job, I don't know what the rules are. So I don't take any risks whatsoever, apart from that one time when I actually fell foul of all the rules and regulations in humiliating and spectacular fashion. So I don't want to talk about anything that's going on anywhere, specifically to constituencies, until I'm a little bit clearer on what I can and can't say, because that's not what interests me. What interests me is the national picture. So I watched that statement on holiday and wrote a column immediately afterwards. I'd written a column that morning for the I newspaper because that's how much I love you. I thought that the idea of 2 whole weeks without being able to enjoy a single nugget of insight from me would be too much for you to bear. So I wrote a couple of columns from my... You're welcome. I wrote a couple of columns from my sun lounger. And last week, so I'd actually, for the first time in my entire life, my entire professional career, I've filed a column several hours early. I hopped out of bed in the Peloponnese, took in the seascape, went for a morning constitutional down to the beach, helped myself to the capacious breakfast buffet, had a quick dip, strolled back to my suite of rooms, and wrote a column several hours ahead of deadline, which I have never done before in my life. Back when I was a full-time newspaper person, which is approximately 1 million years ago, I never filed on time. I mean, in fact, there was one time when I filed so late that it didn't even make the edition that I was filing for. I'm not boasting because it's unprofessional and pathetic, but sadly it's the way I'm built. I've never been able to respond to deadlines until they are breathing down your neck. Hands up if you know which genius of British comedy writing came up with the phrase, "I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly past." Top of the class, early doors, 8 minutes after 10, if you can remember who actually said that. Oh, all right, I'll tell you. It's Douglas Adams. We love Douglas Adams. So I filed a column early, which is something I have never done before. And now, I've got to tell you, world exclusive, I'm never going to do it again. Because I got a lovely message back from the opinion desk that said, this is brilliant, we love it, but Nigel Farage has just announced that he's going to be making a statement at 2 o'clock, so you might have to rewrite the whole thing again. And the column that I'd written was a warning that I have seen this all before. I have seen the claims about his security, which generally hinge upon widely reported or non-existent episodes, like the time he claimed that the wheel nuts on his Volvo had been tampered with in some sort of assassination attempt, and they tracked down the mechanic who had apparently told him that, and the mechanic said in French, that's absolute hogwash. I can't remember exactly what the French word for hogwash was, but it became clear that Farage had not been accurately relaying what he'd been told by the French mechanic. And I remember when he claimed that his home had been firebombed and the police had no record of it. That was only a couple of weeks. So I'd written an article about how I've seen this all before. So I'm not joining in the celebrations of his imminent political demise. I think we've all been a little bit touched by Trump. I mean, sort of intellectually, not in the way that the woman who accused him of rape was reportedly touched by Trump, because, of course, he sued her for libel and lost. Make of that what you will. That's the bravest man Nigel Farage has ever met, by the way. The man who sued a woman who accused him of rape for libel and lost. That's brave. Come on. At least we can all agree that's what bravery looks like. I couldn't quite join in. And here's the thing. I don't know whether it was because I was away and therefore not fully, what's that lovely word, meshing. The cogs weren't fully meshing. So here's the cog that is Farage's political career, spinning wildly, and here's the cog that is me keeping up to date with events, spinning wildly, but not meshing because I was soaking up the Peloponnesian sun, you see. So I wrote this article, and obviously I had to write it again, had to go back to it, the perils of filing early, and redo it, based upon him calling this by-election in Clacton, about which we will say no more. And this was even before all the other major parties said, we're not getting involved in this publicity stunt. You can spend your summer arguing with a bin if you want to. We've got more important things to do. So, for the first time, I think, since this hideous excretion started bobbing around in the toilet bowl of public life, for the first time, I found myself less persuaded of his, not less persuaded of his awfulness. What's the word that I'm looking for? I don't know whether I've got a case of twice bitten, thrice shy. Whether or not the accusations surrounding the money, the constantly changing story, the ludicrous attempt to pretend that he'd somehow made money. Did you notice that? I can't have been the only one that noticed that. Well, this country, it just hates people that make money. You haven't made any money, mate. You've been handed it by a very rich bloke based in Thailand and given it by people who pay you to promote the IRA on Cameo. You're not exactly Alan Sugar, pal, are you? This isn't what you would call a glittering commercial career. In fact, I think the last company you were linked with before you started making money out of politics got a winding up order from His Majesty's or Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs for unpaid taxes. Business genius you ain't. I've also never met anybody who buys into the idea that he would have made a lot of money if he'd stayed in the city. But these claims, perhaps they're lies, perhaps they're exaggerations, these are halfway around the world by now. They're never getting back in the bottle. But it was worth noting, wasn't it, that this idea that I'm being persecuted because I'm so successful at making money. You've literally been handed money by somebody who, hours, days, weeks later, heard you announce policies that were going to make him even richer than he was when he gave you 5 million quid in secret. This idea made money. Promoting gold bullion. We'd like to pay you to tell people that gold bullion is brilliant. Oh, I've put in a shift today, lads. I put in a shit. It's like going down the coal mine. Seriously, recording little cameo messages for weirdos and pranksters and various racists. It's like going down a coal mine. You wouldn't want to do a shift like the shift I've done. 77 votes on the bounce. He's missed in the House of Commons, but he's working so hard to make that money, to make the money that he just gets handed for no reason. For a variety of different and conflicting reasons, by a bloke that's based in Thailand. So it just, am I communicating where I am on this? Am I communicating this sense I have that no matter how big the disgrace, no matter how egregious the behaviour, no matter how obvious the disingenuousness or dishonesty, I think I have reached a point where I don't think it matters. And the polling now at a national level suggests that I am wrong. The mood in the media suggests that's another thing you've got to pick up on, isn't it? The idea that he is a victim of the media class. Have you seen the photograph of him at Evgeny Lebedev's summer party wearing Union Jack shoes while sucking up to Rupert Murdoch? Have you seen? This is the man who is a terrible victim of media attacks. There's even a piece in the Daily Mail today by a clown called Stephen Glover arguing that it's very important that he manages to climb out of this hole. The media have been... Good Lord, I nearly used an incredibly inappropriate... This always happens when I come back from holiday. I'm not particularly potty-mouthed off air, but I do sometimes find my vocabulary straining at the leash when I've had a couple of weeks outside of the studio. Let me try and think of a more appropriate word to describe what the media have been doing to Nigel Farage for the last 10 years. Well, you've heard it. You've heard it in this studio. You've heard it on every broadcast. Would you like to come in, take a seat? Which toe would you like me to tickle first, Mr. Farage? The big one? Certainly. Here we go. Tickly, tickly, tickly. Oh, stop it, stop it, stop it. And that's an interview, according to some broadcasters, according to some people. So the idea that he's been persecuted by the media is as comical as the idea that he would have made a fortune if he'd stayed in the city, or that he's done any work whatsoever in return for the £5 million that he got bunged by Christopher Harborne. So do you see what I mean? It's as if every rock you look under in Nigel Farage's life, personal and political and professional, it's as if every rock you look under reveals 1,000 more rocks to look under. And that's why I think I'm on a slightly different take, because the media has changed. Some people who've spent the last 10 years tickling his toes have found, I don't know whether it is temporarily or permanently, they've managed to find at least one vertebra. They have found just enough spine to actually say, you can't really claim that the British public don't care about a secret £5 million gift from a bloke set to benefit enormously from policies you announced and then deleted from your website when it turned out you'd taken £5 million secretly from a bloke set to benefit from those very policies. But I can't feel what they feel. I don't know why. I don't know whether it's because I've been away and therefore I have missed the mood. Do you see what I mean? Is the music has been playing just out of earshot. I've only been zoning in on sort of Monday evenings to get a quick feel for the format and then write a quick column. I haven't been doing what I do normally when I put in a shift in order to make sure that you can make your decisions and your opinions are going to be based on the information that you need. You've got this idea that the scales have tipped, that the gig is up, that Farage is finished on a national level, that the things we've been saying now for over 10 years, you know, it's 12 years since he was manhandled out of this studio by his own PR guy because his shtick had fallen apart so spectacularly, and that changed nothing. Dan Hodges, who is now a clairvoyant in chief over at the Daily Mail, wrote after that interview that Farage's career was finished. And so when I was reading last week all of these suggestions that the game was up, all of these suggestions that he'd run out of road, all of these suggestions that the mask had finally slipped, I just wasn't feeling it. I just wasn't feeling it. And I don't know, and forgive me because this is a bit self-indulgent, I don't know whether that's because I was unplugged or whether it's because I've seen it all before and I would have arrived at exactly the same conclusion even if I'd been on air for 3 hours a day for the last 2 weeks, which would have been a shame because I know how much you all enjoyed Thursday's show with Honest Bob Jenrick. I don't know if I've ever been prouder of my listeners than when my Sun Lounger started pinging with messages back from Blighty saying your callers are absolutely rinsing him. I would expect that from you, to be honest. But you do occasionally, when I go on holiday, get some of the, how could we put this, some of the more bigoted, prejudiced and racist contributors to the LBC conversation who never have the nerve to ring me when I'm here. They somehow come crawling out of the woodwork when I am away. But I think honest Bob Jenrick, particularly his attempts to pretend that two-tier policing was A thing, and B, of interest to honest, decent people who pay attention to the news, came crashing down around his ludicrous ears. The one thing I am a bit cross about, I got into work this morning, and someone has painted over the picture of me in the foyer. I don't know who that was. There was a lovely picture of me in the foyer here at LBC Towers. It was in a sort of cartoon form in order to just make younger visitors to the studio feel more welcome. I looked a little bit like SpongeBob SquarePants, I suppose, but you could tell it was me because of the artist. Someone's painted over it. Well, apparently it happened on Thursday, shortly after 1 o'clock. I have no idea who could have been responsible for such an abomination, but I'm reassured by management that they're going to get it put up again as quickly as possible. So it's just this thing, right, that everyone else seems to have reached for the party poppers, or everyone else seems to think that the pendulum has swung. Everybody else seems to think that the scales have tipped. And I don't know. And I don't know whether it's because I am being subjective, as in my own personal relationship with the news and with this particular issue, with the awfulness of this particular individual who's I don't know if anyone has done a better job of chronicling just awfulness after awfulness after awfulness. Even the claim he made about being hounded out of a pub, he kind of pretended it was some sort of new. I remember when that happened. He was essentially mobbed by breastfeeding activists in a pub in Kent because he'd made comments about why women shouldn't breastfeed in public a few days earlier. And then to hear him describing it, so sort of 11 years after the event, as evidence of how unsafe he is in daily life. Because he can't go anywhere without being mobbed by breastfeeding activists, poor fella. If you don't want to be mobbed by breastfeeding activists, don't say bigoted and disgusting things about breastfeeding. That's my advice. So I don't know whether it's because of the subjectivity of it, the subjectivity of my position. I can't allow myself to think that the gig is up, or whether actually something about this 5 million quid, something about this ever-changing story, something about this hideous combination of greed and arrogance that sees him claiming that he's perfectly entitled to it and it's nobody else's business but his. Something about the insidiousness of the wriggling, something about the egregiousness of the behaviour, the arrogance of the argument, the disdain for ordinary people, the ludicrousness of the claim. Something about this moment is different from the time he lied about his wheel nuts being tampered with, the time he apparently lied about his house being firebombed, the time he ended up with a winding up order from HMRC over unpaid taxes despite being a business genius, the time I could go on, the time he was so frightened for his safety that he didn't put in an insurance claim on his car that was a write-off despite the fact that he drove away in it and has subsequently claimed to be skint. Who here has ever been skint enough not to put an insurance claim in on a car that had been written off? I mean, just the dishonesty, the deception, the embellishment, all of this, to me, is so baked into Farage. And I accept that I pay a little bit more attention than the average bear. But is this different? 0345 6060973. Remember, you can say no. You can agree with me. I'm hoping you won't. You can agree with me. Is this different? I've been away. I was away all last week. My access to the news was limited through choice. I prefer to try and do a little bit of what the Dalai Lama calls mental hygiene when I'm away. I deserve, I think, at least a couple of weeks not fully plugged in to the merry-go-round of current affairs. Is this different from all the other scandals, all the other examples of egregious behaviour, all the other deceptions, all the other exaggerations, all the other apparent lies, all the other disproved claims, all the other bogus victimhood narratives? Is it different this time? Or will we be here in 6 months' time, looking back upon this period last week, moving forward and just going, yeah, he is the unflushable poo He is the irremovable skid mark on the Y-fronts of British politics, and there is nothing we can do to get rid of him. I don't know. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Hit the numbers now. This is when you realise how much you've missed me, you see, when the catchphrases start kicking in again. Hit the numbers now. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
26 minutes after 10. And of course, you know how this show works. It's not just the what, it's the why. I mean, part of the question I'm asking is, why did I seem to be the only columnist in the country last week who didn't think that Farage was in unprecedented danger, that Farage was on the precipice of political oblivion? Why am I the only one who seems to think that he'll wriggle out of this just as he's wriggled out of every other bucket of hot water that he's found himself in? I don't know whether it is due to my personal positions, whether it is due to the fact that I've been out of the loop for a couple of weeks, or whether it is simply because I'm wrong. Or whether I'm right and everybody else is wrong, which is a position I'm normally very comfortable adopting. OK? Ian is in Glasgow to kick things off. Ian, what do you reckon?
I'm sorry, James. I'm going to have to pour cold water on
Red card. Hydration break. Send him off. What, already?
James, I would love you to be right.
No, hang on. I don't know that he is finished, to be clear. So I think you are actually agreeing.
No, he's definitely not finished.
Right.
You know, I mean, you should know that because you've written about it. I mean, people think these days, sadly, much more with their hearts than their heads. And if you can stoke grievance and division, there are a lot of people who go for that. And I thought when I woke up to the news that Trump had said, you know, that recording grabbed them by them. I thought that's the end of him. He is finished. And the reality is he's still there and he can do what he wants. And I think that Farage, unfortunately, it's not Farage that's the issue.
It's the public.
It's the people.
Yeah.
It's the people. And it's just so depressing that people don't think. And you know, it's just... and you catalogued his long list.
Oh, I didn't touch the sides. I barely touched the sides.
My wife and I were killing ourselves laughing over breakfast.
Yes. Well, I'm very glad to have caused some amusement in the household. But I mean, it's not funny, is it? You can list all of these things that he's wriggled out of before, and therefore conclude that he'll wriggle out of this one. For me, for the record, it was Serge Kovaleski. It was the New York Times journalist who has the congenital joint condition that means he has limited mobility and muscle development. When Trump did his hideous impression of him, I thought, well, there's no way they can elect him president, and that was back during the first time. What if you're more misanthropic than I am, Ian? What if your lack of faith in your fellow citizen is misplaced and at risk of sort of indulging in nationalism or xenophobia? What if we are actually generally better than Americans and we will have a limit past which we won't be carried, however persuasive the populace may be?
Well, you know what? I think, you know, it's not just Britain, it's Europe. I wish you were right again, but I feel we're on a slippery slope to becoming like America, just as the same as parts of Europe are. And, you know, the rise of populism, the rise of divisiveness, the rise of frankly, bigotry, racism and nastiness. I mean, why do we even have to say in the news, you know, when something happens, oh, this person was white?
Yeah.
Well, we all know why.
Yeah. Because
people go, if it's not, they'll go on the street and riot.
It's such a...
that didn't happen 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, it didn't happen 20 months ago. It's post-Southport that's happened. And of course, Southport's riots, the Farage riots, were caused in large part by people like him treating the alleged rapist Andrew Tate as a trusted news source and condemning the so-called media class who... you're right. You paint a bleak picture. You haven't extinguished my hope, actually. You haven't... because I've come back from holiday. I've looked at the polling, and more surprisingly... I've looked at how the toe ticklers are behaving, and the toe ticklers in general, when they move, they stay moved. You know, the people who have spent 10 years tickling his toes and pretending that he's none of the things that everybody honest knows him to be, they've seen the 5 million quid in a slightly different light from the racism, the alleged racism, from the apparent lies about attempts upon his safety, from the obvious egregiousness of promoting the IRA or recording messages for far-right groups. All of those things don't bother them because, between you and me, I think some of them probably quite like it. But the 5 million quid and the arrogant and ridiculous claim that it's none of the public's business, that feels a little bit different to me. Yeah. No, James. Maybe. We'll see. I hope. Yeah. Well, we shall see. I mean, as Rachel Reeves rather beautifully put it, he's chosen to spend his summer arguing with a bin, about which we can say very little because we are now in a period of purdah with regard to that by-election. But on a national level, it's the national polling I'm interested in. It's the national disapproval levels. I mean, when we move, do we stay moved? Do you see what I mean? When people... I mean, because I presume it's a bit like a drug, liking Nigel Farage's bigotry. I presume that the kick that Ian alludes to, that sense of validation you get from seeing your own base prejudices endorsed by somebody who is on the telly and sounds a bit posh, and you sort of think, oh, that's okay then, maybe I'm not a scumbag, because there's someone on the telly who sounds a bit posh saying exactly the same things that I think in my darkest moments about people who don't look like me. That drug, that addictive, intoxicating drug of prejudice endorsement or bigotry endorsement, you get weaned off it by financial behaviour, by financial... I don't know. I honestly don't know. I want you to tell me. 10:32 is the time. Has he run out of road, or are we going to see another exercise in wriggling off hooks? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 10:32. Simon English has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:35 is the time you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Ian in Glasgow there echoed one of the thoughts I did have on my way back from holiday, looking at this terrible story involving Anne Widdecombe, which we will bring you any developments regarding as and when they occur on the programme. And inevitably, Nigel Farage is accused this morning of using her death as to make political capital, but that is as inevitable, I'm afraid, as the sun coming up. Of course, I think we can all agree, thank goodness there were some cameras there when he turned up to lay a wreath. What a happy coincidence for him that was. Terrible story. And yet that constant reporting of the ethnicity of the people that have been arrested, which just looks ridiculous in some ways. I don't know why I found myself thinking about the football and wondering why. I know you can see the football and we don't know who the people who were arrested are, so it's not the strongest analogy that you're going to hear today. But imagine if we started doing it in all other areas of life as well, if we started saying, and the goal was scored by a mixed-race man from Stourbridge, which it usually is. Or by a white man of Irish heritage called Harry Kane. I mean, imagine if we started doing that. The rule of Farage was being applied to all the other areas of life where the ethnicity of a person who's done something is of such enormous importance that it has to be reported, instead of just the shared humanity being the key point. And Ian was right. We do that solely because we live in a country where if they reveal that somebody is brown or somebody is from an ethnic minority background, then the reaction is going to be completely different. So they reveal that somebody is white in the hope of stopping, what would you call it, more riots, I suppose. I've got a little tickle in my throat. You can probably tell it sometimes happens when I come back from holiday. There's nothing we can do about it, but I would crave your indulgence and ask you to bear with me. Or I could just take some calls and let them do the talking. That's a good idea. Ned's in Bradfield. Ned, what do you reckon?
Welcome back, Mr. O'B. Nice to have you. Did you have a splendid time?
I had a lovely time, yeah, although I'm very sad to have missed Robert Jenrick's show. I may have to listen to that on catch-up on Global Player later.
I had to switch it off, I'll be honest with you. Well, he got up my nose. You know, we had some great callers come in, but I just thought, at least he didn't
paint over your picture in the foyer, mate. I don't know what you're complaining about. Absolutely outrageous behaviour. No. Anyway, where were we?
So I would like to focus on, please, something that I think has slipped away or is slipping away that I really picked up on at the time, which was his actual address to the nation. And I've been really struggling to think of the adjective to describe how moaning and whining and whinging and complaining the whole thing actually was. And I just thought, you want to be the Prime Minister? Look at the state of you, man. You know, I've never seen anyone stand up and whine so much like a big baby about how dare you. If it wasn't for this pesky politics business, I've given up my entire life for you plebs. And here you are with the temerity to ask me where I've earned some money from. And I just thought, you're just not fit for purpose. And I really thought the mask slipped then. And Ian's made brilliant points, by the way.
But you speak as somebody who hasn't been persuaded by the mask. So what is of interest to me back in town for the first time in a fortnight is the way the needle has moved. I mean, the polling has been punched both on a personal and a party level. So it's people that were previously on board who are now stepping back. And of course, we don't know whether it will be permanent or temporary. Why do we think that's happening? For the reasons that you say, because nobody likes a coward.
Yeah, but also I think there's probably about 10 or 15% of his vote that's been holding their nose because they're ex-Tory voters.
Yes.
And I think that they have started to stop. Now that the toe ticklers you mentioned, I'm reading stuff on social like, the Mail are having a go at him?
Yeah.
You know, so maybe it is starting to filter through that actually this guy is not what he said.
This is where my page, because the Mail had a go at him in 2014 when I did the interview with him. The Mail predicted that it was all over for him, and they were wrong then, and that's why I suppose I'm thinking that they're probably wrong now. It's because it's about what you get out of supporting him, and Trump manages. So Trump still maintains the myth of being an impressive human being. It's why he posts the memes of himself made out to look like Superman or some sort of military hero. People still drink the Kool-Aid that he serves up. Nigel Farage looking ridiculous on the television in an empty room because he's terrified of questions, can't really cast himself as a tough guy in the way that Trump can in the Oval Office because he will surround himself with sycophants. That's point one to Ian, or point one against Ian, because that's a difference between the US and the UK. He can't surround himself, but I mean, he can go on GBBs but even...
Well, even Camilla Tony's giving him a hard time, do you know what I mean? You know,
really?
And Lena Cunningham,
Well, whatever next.
Yeah, honestly, I mean...
why are you watching that station, by the way?
It's on social media, I don't watch it. Hartley Brewer as well is giving Lena Cunningham a really hard time. There's a thing about her defence policy, so...
Never heard of her.
Well, no, but the interesting thing, like I said to you before...
Why is that happening then? You can mention names if you want. Most people who've run out a road at LBC end up working on one of these weird stations, but why would they now be turning on someone that they have been treating with extraordinary sycophancy for the best part of 10 years?
It's super curious. I don't really understand the thing, but I think that the hardening of this and say why he won't flush away, unfortunately, as I said to you once before, like Donald Trump, you know, he's given people permission to be the worst person of themselves, and that's why they'll never desert him. So you'll get that rump of this sort of MAGA-ish version of reform that it was, I think, one of Tom's texts came in saying, we don't care where the money's from, he doesn't care if it came from Putin, you know, he's our guy.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably a good 10-15% of the country where you know who we're talking about that will never swerve, but I think the people now are going, hang on a minute, you know, it's starting to add up a bit here, and too much time spent in America.
In a way, what we're looking for is the difference between the British electorate and the US electorate. Because he's obviously tried to be a Timu Trump. He's tried to be a sort of pound shop version of Trump. And I think you're onto something here. I can feel a theory developing. Oh, first day back, Keith, I think I've got a theory. I can feel a theory developing. And I think it might be quite a good one. But I'm going to give it a few moments to gestate before I share it. For two reasons. Number one, I might turn it into a column tomorrow. And number two, I want to just make sure that it's not absolutely riddled with holes. Thank you, Ned. Theory incoming. Mo is in Birmingham. Mo, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello,
Good
mate.
to hear you back.
Thank you. Likewise, mate. I've missed you. What's on your mind?
I think two reasons. I think the toe ticklers, I think they're turning slightly against him. And this is a bit of a controversial thought because Kemi Badenoch and the Tories haven't collapsed.
Yeah.
They are sticking stubbornly to a position where you know what? You can't rule her out making some sort of bid for the right.
Yeah, she's turning cruelty and ignorance into an art form, and that is persuading people who love cruelty and ignorance that the Tories might actually still be a viable electoral force. I mean, it's not reflected in the polling, oddly. It's not reflected in the sort of calculus of the situation, but they haven't disappeared entirely. For the major party of opposition to be lagging behind the party of government after the 2 years that Keir Starmer's had is both incredible and ridiculous, and I suppose hilarious as well. But you're right, everyone seems to be buying into this idea that because she has an occasionally half-decent performance at PMQs, the fact that she doesn't understand anything or is across no detail doesn't matter, and therefore we don't need to back Farage because we're going to be able to have a Conservative to support after all.
Yeah, so her ratings have stayed a lot higher than the Conservatives' ratings.
Yes.
And I think I've been reading a lot of commentary to say that sooner rather than later, one of them is going to converge to the other. And I personally think it'll be the Conservative rating that will will be lifted up by Kemi Badenoch's apparent relative likability.
So there's a sentence I've never heard before in my life, and hope that I never hear again. But I think you might be onto something. I mean, the next general election could actually see a return to the two-party politics that we've all written the obituaries for.
Yeah. So the other part...
Why though? I mean, so you've given me the why of it in terms of but the alternative is suddenly real again. But what is it about what Farage has done in the last month or two that has made people who were supremely comfortable with all the other disgusting things he's done? And it's a bit like Donald Trump when Ian mentions the grabbing women by their private parts. I mention the disabled New York Times journalist Serge Kowalewski. Everybody's got a thing that they thought would do for Trump, and all of the Trump supporters stayed on board. Why would people have run out of patience with Farage this month, having been perfectly happy with all of the previous egregiousness?
And I think this is the other part to it. I think Farage, this again sounds a bit of a counterintuitive
go on, I like
comment,
that.
but I'm going to make it. Increasingly, in my opinion, here's a question. What does Farage actually stand for that there aren't better alternatives out there?
He's probably the best at appearing to endorse racist views.
Really?
Yeah.
Given what Rupert Lowe has been going on about and his apparent dedication to the cause.
So he's not even the racist politician of choice anymore.
No, and as I said, those
so
who
the nose holders can go back to Kemi Badenoch.
Yes.
And the out-and-out racists can sign up with the new party, or parties plural. It's so hard to keep up. They all begin with R. We can agree about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that leaves him with who?
That's the thing here. I don't know, and I think it'll become even more of a burning issue for him as things progress. And I think this is the thing here, and this is where the comparison to I think Donald Trump ends. Donald Trump makes himself front and center of everything about what the Republican Party and what his presidency is about. His disappearing act during the whole £5 million donation gift scandal and him putting forward people to speak on behalf of him who have been really apparently incompetent.
While hiding. I mean, it is pathetic. I mean, this
hiding,
is... Yeah, and this is a big difference.
Him at all.
Yeah, so Trump will come out and behave abominably, but he apparently believes it himself. He will attack the journalists and it will stick. What? I don't know enough. I've never lived in the States. What's the difference here? Why? So I've often wondered why when he shuts down a journalist or says, "Shut up, piggy," did he say that once or did I dream it? It's so hard to keep up. Why doesn't the other journalist that he turns to immediately stand up and ask the same question? And the answer is that enough of the media in the United States is complicit in Trump's con that he knows that he can go, and everyone's terrified of losing access, so he knows he can go to somebody next who will not pick up the baton that the previous journalist was running with and carry on. And in this country, for all of my criticisms of the media, something in the last couple of weeks has changed, and it is a combination of the things that you've described. A few journalists who haven't done their job for a decade are finally doing their job. And part of the reason that you provide is unflattering. It's because they no longer think that he is the most viable alternative to a Labour government that would upset their owners and the oligarchs that run them. And part of the reason is because, I suppose, when you talk about that other category of voters, you're talking about people who could never vote for a black woman to become Prime Minister.
Yes, and I think. Look, I've said it to one of your other colleagues in calling in. I personally believe...
Hang on, you're not allowed to ring other... This show's unique. You can't ring other shows if you ring this show. Did nobody tell you that?
It's the LBC fix.
Wait, Eleanor, we can't be letting on people who talk to other presenters. We've got to keep the show special. We've got to keep it pure. This is the JOB experience. We can't be messing about with people like Mo, however good he is. Mo, I'll let you off on this occasion, because I've been away for a fortnight. But if I find out again that you've been talking to other presenters, we're going to have words, or not.
Okay.
Right.
In my heart of hearts, I still believe he doesn't want to be Prime Minister. I think he wants his 150 reform MPs in Parliament and be a perennial troublemaker without responsibility.
Maybe. And you've moved now into the realms of unsupportable speculation as opposed to supportable speculation, and I'm all for a bit of unsupportable speculation, but I do think the weediness of the man has probably come to the fore, and that is, I think, why the Timu Trump shtick is falling to pieces, because he's just a weedy man. He's a weedy man, a really weedy man. And the kind of people who want their prejudices endorsed or want to be able to hold their nose and pretend that he's none of the things that everybody keeps telling them he is. You need to be possessed of something, I mean, whether it's sort of a pathological thing or not, I don't know. But you can't be a weedy man. You can't be hiding and also claiming that you're the tough guy, you can slay dragons. All he does is moan. All he does is moan. And when there aren't any foreigners or brown people or Eastern Europeans to moan about, he moans about the media, despite the fact they've given him an easier ride than any other politician in the country in my lifetime. All he can do is moan and whine and complain and bleat victimhood. And maybe that's why the people who might love the prejudices and the bigotry are falling out of love with him, because he's weedy. So Trump offers exactly the same... There's one crucial difference. This is my theory. I'll share it with you after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's a combination of two topics that we have probably worried at more than any others in recent years. One is about the curious appeal of Donald Trump, and today it's about why Nigel Farage doesn't have it. It's got something to do with ridiculousness. It's got something to do with how hard it is to come back from being ridiculous. And Donald Trump's ridiculousness is very different from Nigel Farage's. Donald Trump believes that he is superhuman. Somewhere inside, his insecurities are so immense that he's created this completely fake personality that other people then endorse. And, I mean, you might get occasional glimpses of how cowardly and thin-skinned he is. But when he claims... You know, the man dodged the draft, didn't he, to go to Vietnam? He is the very epitome, the embodiment of cowardice. But he behaves like a superhero, so for bears a very little brain, so convincing. So he promises to make rich people richer. That's point one, right? The richer you are, the more money he's going to make you. So he gets all of them on side, and 52% of the job is done. But the other 48% is to take poor people with you. And how do you take poor people with you? Well, you've got to look back to the Middle Ages. You've got to look back to the days of unaccountable kingship. You've got to look back to the days of these mythological creations that people would sacrifice their lives in support of, and the belief, or at least the ability to persuade, that they possessed. So Donald Trump, there's two things going on here. I want to stay with this in the next hour. So if you're waiting to talk to me, don't panic. We will stick with it. I just find it really, really interesting, particularly this comparison now. If the wheels are coming off the Farage bus, then why, given that Donald Trump's position was untainted by all of his absurdities, so much so that he could be re-elected as president? So point one is ridiculousness, is that you look at Trump and you see something that's not quite, what's the word that I want? It's not human. That's why he loves the memes. It's like a it's the wrestling. It's the wrestling, right? So you watch the wrestling and you know it's kayfabe, the word of the week. And the week just before I went away, it's kayfabe. So you watch the wrestling and you have a cognitive dissonance going on. You know that what you're watching is not real. You know that it's choreographed and scripted and very carefully, you are being very carefully manipulated to stay excited and keep handing over your money. But at the same time, you love it. So somewhere inside, and I know there are probably some people who think it's all real, but somewhere inside, you simultaneously know that it's not real and love it. And that's the pay dirt. Oh, this is good. That's the absolute jackpot, right? That's where the money is. You're selling a pantomime. Oh, no, I'm not. But it's real. Oh, no, it isn't. So how can it be a pantomime and real at the same time? Don't ask me, ask Donald Trump, because he is literally a pantomime dame, a pantomime villain, a pantomime hero. He's Buttons, he's Jack, he's the Beanstalk, he's the bloody giant. He's all of them. And people know it's not true, but in the same way that the people behind... And listen, the wife of the bloke that set up the wrestling is now his education secretary. In case you think I'm exaggerating this stuff, that's the model that he has followed. We had that brilliant show, didn't we? That brilliant thing. That was on television with Munya Chihuahua, that superb examination of the relationship, the similarities between what Trump does and what the wrestling does. So the wrestling creates mythologies, whether positive or negative. It creates mythologies. And the one thing the wrestlers can't do, this is it. The one thing the wrestlers can't do is take their costumes off. Right? The one thing the wrestlers can't do is show their real faces. Come out from behind the very carefully cultivated persona. And it's weird, but Trump never does that. When he's dancing, he looks absolutely ridiculous, but he's like a wrestling figure. And when he says fake news, he doesn't sound frightened of fake news. He's lying. You know that. I know that. He probably knows that. An awful lot of people around him know that. But he looks the part. He doesn't look frightened when he says to a female reporter, "Be quiet, piggy," or whatever it was that he said. And normally you'd go, that's absolutely disgusting. But hey, he's not real. It's Donald Trump. He's the guy, come on. So he manages to sustain and maintain the exterior, the brand, if you like. I don't know what the word is, the avatar. What is the word for the wrestling characters? Because they're not real people. He's the president. He's a wrestler called the president. He's the president. Here's Giant Haystacks. Here's Big Daddy. Forgive my references. They're a little out of date. And here's the blooming president. He's the president. So you cheer him or you boo him. You cheer him or you boo him. You don't analyse what he's done. You don't pay attention to the court cases. You don't really care. Oh, I hate the fact he's made $1 billion. Hey, well, more fool you. I love the fact he's made $1 billion. But you cheer him or you boo him. But what you can't do is see him. You can never see the human, the draft dodger, the what's it grabber, the disabled person mocker. You can never see him because he's not a real person. What happened with Farage last week, particularly in that statement, is he looked utterly pathetic. He looked utterly pathetic. So even if you love what he's selling, you can fall out of love with the salesman. This is it, isn't it? This is what's happening. This is why perhaps things are a little bit more serious for him than I thought at 10 o'clock this morning. Imagine if you are prepared to fall out with family and friends because of your support for this guy, because he's incredible, he's the greatest, he's the goddamn president, he's just like Trump. And then you see him, you see him sort of dressed like a Dulwich College day boy's idea of what the landed gentry looked like, utterly inauthentic. You see him claiming that he's some sort of business genius because he's been given £5 million by a cryptocurrency billionaire who is set to become ever more richer if Farage introduces the policies that he announced and then deleted from his website. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. He's weedy and whining. So even if you love the snake oil, there's got to come a point where you go, well, I might love snake oil, but I'm not buying it from this bloke because he's just a weed.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11:03, and that's what they can smell. That's what the tummy ticklers and the toe ticklers can smell. They can smell weakness. You never get that with Trump, do you? I mean, for all his ridiculousness and for all of the clear and blatant adoption of wrestling tropes and wrestling memes, he never appears weak. I mean, this is a bloke that will share footage of him as an enormous statue on the Gaza Strip. that this is an absolute confection, a completely manufactured image, and America will buy that, or enough of America will buy that. Can you be a heel and a face at the same time in wrestling? So I'm on a bit of a crash course, and I'll take you with me if you don't know what I'm talking about, I promise, because I'm new to most of this. My friend Wayne is a bit of an expert on the wrestling, and Munya came into the studio to talk us through it. Keith knows a little bit about it. But you can be, so you're either a heel or a face, but actually it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So the heels can have fans. The heels are the baddies, the faces are the good guys. Trump is a heel and a face at the same time. Trump is a goodie to the good guy, to the people that like him, and a terrible, terrible baddie to the people that don't. So even Trump derangement syndrome is like a wrestling phrase, isn't it? You just shout, hey, you got Trump derangement syndrome. And you go, no, I haven't. How dare you, man? You've got Trump derangement syndrome. And and you're both arguing with each other about the same guy. You think he's a good guy. He knows he's a bad guy. He's obviously a bad guy. But then wrestling is wrestling. It's not real life. Farage's statement last week was weak. Oh, the media are mean to me. Oh, the political... Oh, career... How long has he been a flipping politician for? If he hadn't kept losing elections to dolphins, he'd have been in Parliament even sooner. The man is just objectively pathetic. And this is the thing. Trump is as well. But the fans can't see it. So this fascination I've got with what on earth has happened while I've been on holiday is coming into focus now. And I think, to labour the point, that Farage, the real Nigel Farage, is coming into focus as well. And people who may well love all of the bigotry, all of the disingenuousness, all of the dishonesty, people who may love all of that. I don't want to be supporting a weakling. I don't want to be supporting a bloke who looks more and more like Alan Partridge every day. I want to be supporting a guy who, who looks like he could. I don't want to be. I want to support a winner. I don't want to support a guy that's frightened of his own shadow. I don't want to support a guy that's only these days confident when he's in an empty room. I don't want to support a guy that started turning on all the journalists that have spent 10 years tickling his toe. I don't want to support a weakling. I don't want to support a weed. So as we move into the second hour of the programme, I'm wondering whether that is... Because I don't imagine you're going to ring me anymore. I loved it when you did, by the way, and tell me why you have fallen out of love with Nigel Farage, because you tend to wait until I've gone on holiday before you ring this programme. But the reason why people are is because they've managed to persuade themselves that he's a hero, a face, and the longer this latest saga has gone on, the more he's looked like a weakling. The more he's looked like a weed, who also has this, because Trump's vanity, I mean, it changes almost overnight from a strength to a weakness. The vanity of a man who would ignore Henry Novak's own family and seek to make political capital out of the poor lad's murder. A man who stands accused today of seeking to make political capital out of Anne Widdecombe's death. That is hideous behaviour, but if he's your man... You're not just going to go along with it. You're going to love, yay, look at him. He's upsetting all the right people. He's upsetting all... But what's he doing now? He's moaning about being asked to account for his... And he tried to do it, didn't he? It's none of your business. I can spend it on Ferraris. I can spend it on whatever I want. It's none of your business. It's none of your business. He just looks weak. He looks pathetic. Trump would lie. Trump would say, yeah, I got really rich, but everybody else has as well. The only reason I've got rich is because I'm doing such a good job of running the economy. Farage isn't running the economy. He can't tell that lie. How come you've made all this money out of promoting the IRA and taking gifts in secret from foreign-based billionaires? Well, it's because I'm a really good businessman. How stupid would you have to be to buy that? So you could, I suppose, and I'll check in a minute to see whether anybody has, send me a message saying something like, well, I'd take 5 million quid, but then you're changing the nature of wealth. So, listen, here's a bloke, right, in the boondocks. Here's a bloke who is never going to be rich, right? But he thinks about what he'd be like if he was. And I'm talking now about a rural American voter. I'm talking now about what we might in this country describe as an ordinary working class man. And I hate that phrase, because if you're talking about Nigel Farage, the claim that he appeals to ordinary working class people is profoundly offensive. In my experience, you're just as likely to be a racist if you live in a manor house as you are if you live in a council house. But this bloke, poor old Neil and Andy, I get it, they should get a special award for staying on the line. Well, tell them they can have a rest if they want. I'm going nowhere until I come back from the next break, because this is the key. God, I've missed you. Seriously. I love my holidays, all right? But this is the best job in the world. To be able to work this stuff out live on the radio in real time with your help, it's such a privilege. I never, ever underestimate that. I want you to know that. You are imagining what it would be like to be rich when you look at your hero. And you are thinking, and I'm going to indulge in a little bit of generalisation here that will be a tiny bit lazy and unfair, but I am thinking about the kind of the truck driving Trump voter, and they imagine being a billionaire. And what would I do if I was a billionaire? Spoiler alert: they're not going to sponsor the opera, right? What would I do if I was a billionaire? Do you know what I'd do if I was a billionaire? I'd have McDonald's breakfast, lunch and tea. What does Donald Trump do? Lives on cheeseburgers. So his wealth and his greed is not going to alienate his base, because his relationship with money is exactly the relationship they would have with money if they had lots of money. You know? That's why he wears a uniform. He's always wearing the same clothes. You can't read too much into what he's wearing. Red tie, navy suit, white shirt. Just like a cardboard cutout. What would you do if you had billions and billions of pounds? Well, I'd want a great big plane. I'd want to fly around the world in a great big plane, and I'd want to have cheeseburgers for every meal. And they look at Donald Trump and his greed and his wealth and his quite possible corruption, and they think, yeah, man, that's what I'd do. That's what I'd do. They look at a wealthy Liberal or a wealthy Democrat going to the flipping opera, spending money on books, doing that kind of, got a lot of money. Sheesh, no way. And Farage, craven desperation to be part of the aristocracy. The way that he dresses is so pathetic. So it's like the fast show's idea of what a social climber would look like. And they see that. Farage wants to use his money to buy loads of houses and to buy tweed suits and to pretend that he's a countryman. He'd probably buy a horse and go hunting if he could. So your person who is forgiving Trump for his financial greed isn't going to forgive, because he's essentially saying, well, I can spend this money on whatever I want. I've already bought 5 houses. There's something here about what you would do if you were rich. And Trump is not behaving like the rich people. So you can stay on board. Trump is not behaving like the rich people. He is not doing all the things that you kind of feel alienated by or you don't understand. Trump is behaving like a Trump voter's idea of how billionaires should behave. Nigel Farage is desperate for the approval of the aristocracy. Do you know this geezer who's given him a ton of cash, the latest story? Posh George, they call him. Why do you think they call him Posh George? Because he's an aristocrat. Nothing says anti-establishment like staying in a house rented by an aristocrat. Do you see what I mean? He's so I think, and I'm obviously trying to read the minds of people who I don't know, but there's something here, isn't there, about a desperation to be part of the oligarch class. Well, Trump somehow manages to simultaneously indulge these people, seduce these people, pander to these people, sign up these people, while giving the impression of not being part of their world, of disapproving of these people, thinking he's separate from it or better than it. Whereas Farage, oh man, you can smell the desperation to be part of it. Had his face pressed up against the sweet shop window for his entire, let me in, please let me in. Claiming to be anti-establishment. Is that the most ridiculous? Boris Johnson used to claim to be anti-establishment. What establishment is it that they're opposed to? With their Daily Mail columns and their Daily Telegraph columns and their aristocrat friends and their donations from billionaires. What the heck is the establishment that these clowns are opposed to? They're not, spoiler alert, opposed to the establishment. Do you know where Boris Johnson lived when he left Downing Street? He lived in the back garden of the bloke that owns JCB. That's how anti-establishment he is. Moved into a house owned by a billionaire. I presume for free. And it's a lovely thing for a billionaire to do. Most of them just get peacocks to strut around the garden to impress their guests. Anthony Bamford, the owner of JCB, he had an actual prime minister. If you look over there, just look over there behind us, you'll see a prime minister walk past in a minute. He's living in my summer house. It's like a little bauble in the pocket of a billionaire. That was Boris Johnson, and Nigel Farage is exactly the same. Donald Trump gives the... Anyway, that's enough from me. That's my theory now. So two things have happened. Nigel Farage looks like a weed, and they can't forgive that, even if they still love what he's selling. And the difference between him and Trump is that Trump is a non-billionaire's idea of how a billionaire should behave, whereas Nigel Farage just wants to be in the same room as them. Just wants to eat the crumbs from their table. Just why you see him sort of all smarmy and sycophantic when he's in the company of people like Rupert Murdoch and Evgeny Lebedev. He'll never tell them that he's a victim of the media class. He'll never be telling Rupert Murdoch that the Sunday Times is a Labour-supporting newspaper. He just saves all that for his mugs, for his marks, for his shills, for the voters. Donald Trump is a Donald Trump supporter's idea of what a billionaire should be like, because that's what they would be like if they were billionaires. Nigel Farage, by contrast, is just a tribute act. He just wants to be like them so desperately that when questions are asked of why on earth he's accepted a secret £5 million from an incredibly wealthy foreign-based businessman, he has to somehow pretend that he deserves it, that it's a consequence of his hard work or his character. It's like being born 3-0 up and pretending that you've scored a hat-trick. You know what that money is. I know what that money is. Christopher Harborne knows what that money is. Nigel Farage knows what that money is. Honest Bob Jenrick knows what that money is. That brilliant and hilarious woman who's running for London Mayor knows exactly what... None of them can say it. Of course they can't. We all know what that money is. But he has to pretend somehow I deserve it. I'm good for it. It's got nothing. And that's why you shouldn't be asking me questions about it. So, why do you think this particular scandal is landing in ways that previous scandals did not? I've given you my theory, and now I want to hear yours. Why is this, regardless of whether we think it's game over or not, why is this one moving the needle? 350 polls in which they were on top, and then last week one in which they weren't. That's quite a big deal. As I say, it may be that the tide goes back in again, but why is this one landing in ways that previous scandals have not? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Why? 18 minutes after 11 is the time. And I suppose that's the question that I would ask more loudly than anybody else. I could say, for example, I've been telling you for years, I've been showing you for years, with receipts, with evidence, how unworthy Nigel Farage is of your support. So why are people finally waking up to it now? What is it about these stories, all this money, all these donations? What is it about this moment that has and is causing him so much apparent damage, whether it's permanent or not? Right, I'm going to shut up for at least 4 seconds. Daniel's in Golders Green. Daniel, what have you got?
Good morning, James. Firstly, can I give you an apology, because you have been right. You have been trying to tell us for years, and some of us, like me, who've supported and followed Nigel Farage, have been willfully blind to it.
Okay.
Look, James, Nigel Farage, with regard to this scandal, has exposed himself as the charlatan snake oil salesman grifter he really is. He's given 27 different explanations as to what.
And counting, Daniel, and counting.
And counting. We might get up to 5 million, James, soon. No, look. First of all, he said it was an unconditional personal gift from a friend. Then he said it was a reward for Brexit. Then he said something else. This is why it is his undoing, James, because he has given so many different countervailing, contradictory explanations and excuses that, quite frankly, even the most hardcore Nigel Farage supporter could not fail to see.
But he's done this before in other areas, so I need to pin down why this area matters so much to you. So I remember when he claimed that his car had been tampered with, and it hadn't. That's a fairly massive thing to say, particularly if you've got young children. You know, they're going to read these stories in the newspaper. They're going to be I remember thinking at the time, what is wrong with this man? And the people that you're talking about, possibly including yourself, didn't mind about that. That, you know, the claims, let's leave Brexit out of it, but all of the things that he claimed about Brexit turned out not to be true. He changed his story there. You've got the terrible events in Southport that he sought to capitalise on by amplifying the misinformation being punted out by an alleged rapist. Why would all of those wash over people, possibly you, and this one won't?
I think because of the sheer size of it, James, and the
amount of money.
Yeah, the amount of money and the fact that his reaction to it. It's not just about the size of it, the £5 million. It's his reaction to it. It's him snapping at Nick Ferrari, your colleague, telling him it's none of his business. What's it got to do with him? I could buy Ferraris if I want. You know, he has no understanding, Nigel Farage, of how appalling that looks to people. You know, James. In the past, Nigel Farage has been able to weed his way out of it. He's been able to actually, to be fair to him, put up quite a strong media appearance. He's been able to challenge and be quite, forceful in what he says. This time, he hasn't. You know when he snaps at friendly journalists.
Yes.
He's done for. That is not the action. Those are the actions of a cornered rat.
Crikey! Why do you think? I mean, if we were to speculate on what's going on inside his head, then what do you think has happened? Why has he not managed to find the right notes to play in this particular spotlight?
Well, as a former police officer who's dealt with suspects who've been found guilty, when interviewing them or challenging them, James, they act defensive when they know they've done something wrong. And I suspect, although I don't know, but I suspect that Nigel Farage has had sight of a preliminary...
don't we need to be a little bit careful here? Or we can simply say he fears that he is going to be found to have breached the parliamentary rules.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I suspect he fears that he is likely to be found to be in breach of the parliamentary rules, which is, of course, why he then called this completely unnecessary, self-absorbed, selfish, unnecessary by-election in Clacton.
So being cornered. Let's not call him a rat again, but being cornered, and knowing that this arsenal of skills that you have are not up to this particular task, and knowing that even the journalists who may have previously been extraordinarily friendly towards you are going to care about this, and to tell them that they have no business caring about it is the worst. Could he have handled it any differently? If we were assembling a politician or a populist or a snake oil salesman, how might he have handled it differently? Once that £5 million came out, and his attempts to claim... Do you remember he claimed it was Russian hackers or something, or Russian people that had... I can't remember what he claimed, but I'm sure he claimed that Russia had been involved. So he tries... It's a bit like watching... It's a bit... Do you know what I mean? Like I'll try this and I'll try that and I'll try... And they all failed. The Russia thing didn't bite. Glenn Owen wrote it up for the Mail on Sunday. Everybody else laughed. Same journalist, in fact, who wrote up the story about the wheel nuts on his Volvo being tampered with, which was equally true. So he tried all of these tactics. They all failed. And the £5 million is not going anywhere. And that's the thing he can't get past.
Exactly. He claimed that the information about the $5 million had come out via a Russian hack. Is what he alleged, which is completely irrelevant because it's nothing to do with the information itself.
But that's worked in the past. It's completely, whether it's true or not doesn't matter. Is it enough? We talked a lot during Trump's first term about it, and Boris Johnson actually. All you've got to do is get through the next news cycle. And so that would be enough to get him through the next news cycle. He's hoping people are going to say, oh, well, that's not great, but he shouldn't have been hacked by the Russians. I wonder what's going to happen tomorrow. This one is not going away. And I don't fully get why, actually. Why is this one not going away? Is it because we all know what £5 million feels like, looks like? If it was £1 billion, he may actually be in slightly less trouble because it is too big a figure to contemplate or to think about. But £5 million, it's simultaneously huge and paltry.
Yeah, but it's not just about the amount. This time it's about the way that he's reacted to it.
He's behaving like a loser.
He's behaving like a loser. He is. He's sulking. He's throwing his toys out the pram. He's refusing to answer questions during, like, to Beth Rigby. He's snapping at journalists. He's telling people it's none of their business. Those are not the actions of someone who believes that they have done absolutely nothing wrong and that they're all in the clear. If he believed genuinely that there was nothing, no wrongdoing, he would say, look, this matter is currently subject to a parliamentary investigation. I'm confident I'll be cleared. I'm very happy to answer questions about it. I'm confident I've done nothing wrong and I'll be cleared. That's all he had to have said.
But he's not. This is where your contribution is so effective, because he's not confident he's going to be cleared. So he's already trying to get in front of the findings of the committee going against him if and when they do. He's trying to get in front of that, which puts him on really tricky territory, because he hasn't got the skill. He hasn't got the cards to sit this one out, to play this hand out.
Correct. He doesn't, and he doesn't. So he hasn't got the cards, as his friend Trump would say. And also, again, that is why I believe he called the election. He jumped before he was pushed. That's
what I mean by trying to get in front of the findings and then being able to somehow turn around and say, well, this doesn't matter. The people have already spoken, which is obviously pathetic. But he banks upon the patheticness of people to sustain his career, just like Trump does.
Yeah, they do. And look, Trump has also shown himself, instead of making America great again and helping the millions of voters who helped get him elected for a second time, he's been off enriching himself, making $2 billion for himself. How can an ordinary voter, a struggling family in Florida or Alabama or Mississippi, how can they relate to that? The guy's made $2 billion. There's nothing wrong with making money if you pay taxes and generate wealth. I'm not demonizing that at all. But these are people that said that they would improve the lives of the voters who voted
and he's
for them.
Laughing at them. He's laughing at them while pretending to be one of them. Whereas that's the thing with Farage. The pint doesn't do it anymore. So he's laughing at them, and he can't really pretend to be one of them, because if someone gave them £5 million, they'd absolutely know that it was other people's business. The idea, I'm running for office, I'd like to be Prime Minister. There's a billionaire in Thailand that's just given me £5 million, but it's absolutely none of your business. He can't. That's it, isn't it? You can't laugh at that. You've done it again. Thank you, Daniel. That's another bit of insight. You can't simultaneously laugh at them and pretend to be one of them in this sort of moment. Trump still can, but Farage can't pretend to be one of his people when he's refusing to answer questions about £5 million. He so obviously wants to be part of George Cottrell's mysterious world. That's the convicted, I don't know what word to use, criminal probably, well, fraudster, the convicted fraudster who calls Nigel Farage daddy. Nigel Farage says he's like a son to him. It's funny, isn't it? What is it about George Cottrell that doesn't see Nigel Farage claiming that people like that... He's a fighting age man, isn't he, George Cottrell? Is he a fighting age man, convicted fraudster? Why are you inviting him into your inner circle and letting him call you daddy? What is it about? I don't know. But you haven't got... you can't pretend to be one of the people that you're laughing at unless you are possessed of Donald Trump's unique skill set, because Donald Trump is a Philistine. And Nigel Farage... And he's intellectually a Philistine, but he loves the trappings of wealth. Nigel Farage wants to go to fancy restaurants and private members' clubs in the Mall. Donald Trump really wants to have cheeseburgers for dinner. Nigel Farage wants to have, fine wines and caviar. Donald Trump wants Diet Coke and cheeseburgers. If there's a PhD thesis in this somewhere, it will be linked to the food. I honestly believe the fact that, and I presume it's true, it's not like Harold Wilson's pipe. Nigel Farage doesn't even drink beer when he's with his friends in the restaurants and the clubs that he goes to. He drinks expensive wine. Camera turns up. Oh, get the pint pot out. They probably keep it in a briefcase. Get the pint pot out. There's a photographer around the corner. And that is perhaps the bit that's beginning to slip. Why is he hanging out with aristocrats? Staying in their houses, not declaring their donations? Why has he taken £5 million from a crypto billion? Oh, do you know what? Maybe he's not one of us after all. Maybe he's not one of us. Maybe he's one of them. Simon English has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11. I think I just want to clarify something. It was the first caller today, I think, Ian in Glasgow, pointing out how sad it is now that news coverage contains the ethnicity of suspects with reference to the horrible story about Anne Widdecombe's apparent murder. And the fact that the police now feel compelled to say that the man who was originally arrested was a 26-year-old white man. They feel compelled to point out that they have no reason to believe that her death was politically motivated. And when I sit here sort of wringing my hands and saying how sad that is, I'm not under any illusions about why they do it. They have to do it now because of Nigel Farage. If it was announced that the suspect in a case was from an ethnic minority, then we would see the social media bonfires that we saw after the murders in Southport, or that we saw after the trial of Henry Novak. And it doesn't matter that the families of the victims plead with politicians not to seek to make racist or political capital out of these situations. If they don't announce what the ethnicity is, then they will lie about it, just as they did with regard to Southport, or the refugee status, or the religion of a suspect. So it is a real shame that it happens, but I don't blame the police. I don't think the police have any choice. The only thing it does is, of course, create a world in which, when a suspect is from an ethnic minority, or when a suspect is a refugee, it creates an idea that it's almost okay then to react with terrible violence, or with pogroms, or with pure cold rage, or whatever phrase you prefer. But they have no choice in the case, because of course the massive majority of crimes are going to be committed by white people. That's just arithmetic. And so every time they announce that we believe this a suspected crime, or this actual crime has been committed by a white person, then the social media madness gets dialed down until it isn't a white person that committed it. And no matter then if the family, as Henry Novak's father did, come out and say, we were in court every day, we know that this was not a racist attack, we know that this was not in any way linked to any of the things that terribly dishonest and disingenuous people may claim, please don't do it. Alice Gross's family did exactly the same thing. Fusilier Lee Rigby's family have done exactly the same thing. And people like Farage ignore them. Already accused today of trying to make political capital out of Anne Widdecombe's death. And if the police were compelled to announce that the suspect in that case was from an ethnic minority, I'm going to let you speculate about what would happen. That's why they have to do it. I just want to clarify that I understand that, even if I perhaps earlier gave the impression that I didn't. But still, Daniel was brilliant in Golders Green. I think probably our first repenting Faragist, But why this story? Of all the other stories I've shared with you now for 14 years or so, 12 years, why this one? Why is this one moving the needle? 0345 6060 973. Not declaring benefits provided by a convicted fraudster. This man started knocking about with Nigel Farage when he was in his early 20s. Why would a man in his early to mid-20s want to knock about with Nigel Farage and call him daddy? And why would Nigel Farage encourage him? Answer, he's extremely rich and he gives lots of things to Nigel Farage or his party, or quite possibly both. Because, of course, we don't know that Christopher Harborne is the only bloke to have just funneled money directly into Nigel Farage's own pockets. In fact, if you wanted to, and remember, I'm just asking questions, if you wanted to understand the petulance with which he's responding to these questions, one theory could be that there's way more money where that came from. And so he's got to try. He can't respond to this in his usual blustery way. Because he knows that Christopher Harborne is not the only billionaire to have given him money for undisclosed and ever-changing reasons in secret. Just a possibility, not suggesting for a moment that that's what's happened. But if you were trying to understand why a usually quite slick media performer is suddenly looking so weedy and pathetic, the most obvious answer would be fear. Whether it's fear of this particular investigation or fear of further revelations, I do not know. 11:37 is the time. Rob's in Gloucester. Rob, what have you got?
Hi there. So I think the reason that this whole story is sticking around so much is because he just keeps changing the excuse.
I think he's always done that.
No, but this is different. So when it first came out, it was a gift for delivering Brexit.
Yes. No, right? It wasn't. How dare you? It was security reasons because he's not safe. He still says that, Rob. He still says...
No, that was the second excuse.
No, it was the first one.
No, so there was.
I'm going to fight you on this, just so you know.
You okay?
Yep.
So the first
Ding,
time
ding.
it came out,
Are you a heel or a face? I'm going to be a tweener.
my wrestling knowledge is pretty dated, unfortunately.
Yeah, so's mine, actually. I'll be Giant Haystacks, you be Big Daddy. Oh, no, you can't be Big Daddy. That's Nigel's name, isn't it, for George Cottrell?
I'm sure that when this whole story first broke, that he came on some show and he said that it was given as a reward for delivering Brexit by Christopher Harborne.
That was the second one.
That was the second excuse. So the first excuse was the security.
Yeah, because this is. Hang on a minute. I just need. I know, but I want to say something quite serious, even though we're having a bit of fun at the moment. Of all the disgusting things the man has done, I think in a world where Joe Cox and David Amos's family will never see their loved ones again, ever, to claim to be the most attacked politician in Britain in recent history is beyond contempt. It's the single most disgusting thing I can remember a politician doing in all the years that I've been doing this job. That's absolutely extraordinary, and it's why I remember with absolute certainty that was his first explanation and excuse for why he took the £5 million. And then the second was it was a reward for Brexit.
Okay, but they've circled back now to it being security.
Yeah, and he's repeated that hideous claim again with utter contempt for the grieving families of Joe Cox and David Amos. He's returned to that bleating, cowardly victimhood as well.
Yeah, but the problem that he's got is that, again, if it was for security, then the way around it would be simple. You could say, the money has been put to one side and it's being released in tranches to pay for my security over the next 20 years. But instead, he comes on LBC and says, if I want to spend the money on Ferraris, I can. And of course he still hasn't had any surgeries. He hasn't had any surgeries in Clacton because he claimed that he'd been told he wasn't safe, and then all the people that he claimed had told him he wasn't safe came out and said that they hadn't told him that at all. So this is why I'm confused, because maybe I pay too much attention to this stuff, but he has done all of these things before. He's changed his story before. He's done all of the things you described before. Something about this story is different. And it's not the wriggling. It's not the wriggling, because that's his nature. That's who he is. That's all he does. He wriggles. True, but perhaps it's as simple as the fact that it's £5 million that he's got to pay no tax on.
Yeah.
And at a time when people are struggling and bills are going up, and you look at the price of petrol and all of these things, people look at it and go, hey, he's just been given £5 million, and he can't actually really give any real reason why.
No.
And the money comes from this crypto guy, and then a story comes out about him having conversations with the Bank of England about crypto deregulation and all of these kinds of things. And you just think to yourself, it simply doesn't pass the sniff test. This guy has moved to Thailand, has lived there for 20 years. His wealth is, I don't know, seems a bit suspect.
Well, you can't say that. I mean, we don't know that for a start, but it's certainly immense. All we can say with confidence about his wealth is immense, and in the realms of speculation, we can add, apparently it's still not enough for him, because he still presumably wants to make more and more money, which is why he must have been so delighted when Nigel Farage coincidentally announced plans to introduce legislation that would make him enormously and measurably richer. Why did he take the £5 million, Rob?
Well, I mean, I guess he's a man who likes to find the things in life. He's a guy who claims to be a man of the people and a cigarette and a pint in the pub, but he also owns 5 houses and
5 that we know of.
It's like Boris Johnson's children. 5 that we know of.
Yes, it's okay. 5 that we know of. That's the bit, I suppose, as a bit of a Farageologist, if that's a word. The obvious answer to is he didn't think it would ever come out, which makes me wonder whether this is the only gift that he's received.
But again, we've got this parliamentary investigation going into it, and the excuse that it was a private gift, so it wasn't declarable. It just doesn't make any sense, and I think that's part of it as well, because the rules are very clear. In the 12 months prior to you being elected to Parliament, you have to declare all of these things. That seems pretty cut and dried, doesn't it?
Yes, I think it does, but again, that's for the committee to decide, and that is what they are investigating. But if we knit your call to Daniels in Golders Green a moment ago, then we're left with the very strong possibility that he thinks that result is going to go against him. So the only thing that explains this ludicrous pantomime in Clacton is an attempt to pretend that it doesn't matter, or to claim that the result doesn't matter, that the findings don't matter. What if that
£5 million isn't an amount of money that you simply forget to put on your declaration form?
No.
You willingly decide not to do that.
No, he's kept it secret. He's very deliberately kept it secret. We know that. And his argument is he didn't think he had to declare it. But why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you
Palpable nonsense, yeah.
But why wouldn't you declare it? You know, you got nothing to hide, you got nothing to fear. Oh, and Christopher Harborne's given me £5 million because, you know, he really likes my haircut. He's just £5 million. I have to declare. That's the bit. Should we add that to the mix? Got a few minutes left before the end of this hour. I've got something completely different for you in the next hour. Why did he take the £5 million? Why did he take it? Greed? Just greed, right? It's just greed. Just why would you take? Because if I wanted to be Prime Minister, I would not take £5 million from you if you offered it to me. If you wanted to give me £5 million now, just because I've brought so much joy to your life, I would accept it. I want to be absolutely clear about that. If you wanted to leave me £5 million in your will, that with no questions asked, no strings attached, I would accept it. I don't know whether that's unethical. It may be unprofessional. It may be against global policy. It may be against the LBC regulations, in which case, obviously, I won't be able to accept it. But as things stand right now, if you want to give me £5 million... In fact, you can prove that I'm telling the truth now by giving me £5 million, and I will accept it. I want to be absolutely clear about that. And there is no limit on the number of people from whom I would accept £5 million. I'd accept all of it, from all of you. £5 million. But if I was hoping to be Prime Minister, I just simply wouldn't. So I haven't had many like this, but one or two, the desperate attempts to pretend that this isn't a big deal are coming from people who say things like, well, you'd take £5 million if someone offered it to you, to which the answer is yes, of course I would, but not if I wanted to be Prime Minister in the next few years. That is almost such an obvious observation, I can't believe I have to make it. But I do, because Idiot's Corner is still a thing, albeit that we haven't put anyone in there yet today. Well, you'd take £5 million. Yes, I would take £5 million if someone offered it to me, because there's nothing I can give them in return. Maybe if you said, if I give you £5 million, will you do Mystery Hour every day? If I give you £5 million, would you do Mystery Hour for 3 hours every Thursday? Well, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd ask the boss. I'd say, is there any way I could do Mystery Hour for 3 hours on Thursday? And he would say, why do you want to do that? I said, well, someone's offered me £5 million. And he'd say, I'd do that face. And he'd go, I don't think so, James. I don't think that's really going to happen, is it? You know the face, right? It's not just me that sees that face. Can I do Mystery Hour for 3 hours on Thursday, please? No. Well, hang on a minute. What? Well, it's what the listeners want. Is it? Yes, look, this one wants to give me £5 million. No, I don't think you can take £5 million from listeners in return for doing Mystery Hour for 3 hours on a Thursday. But can I take £5 million for no reason whatsoever? Yeah, of course you can. Do you want to be Prime Minister at the next general election? No, of course I don't, because if I did, there's no way I'd take a secret £5 million present, in quotes, from... So go on, seriously, we're moving on to something else at 12. If you want to jump in now, we're still asking the question of why is this landing so differently? I'm still not there, by the way, and that's partly my fault for paying so much attention to all the other wriggles and snivels and slithers that he's done over the years. Why is this one kicking? And why did he take the money? If he wants to be Prime Minister, and the polls suggest he's in with a very good chance, he gets checkers for the duration of the Parliament. He gets a free house. He can rent out all 5 of the property. Oh, no, he can't, because he may have bought them with the £5 million that he got off Chris. So that bit doesn't work. But he gets checkers, gets Downing Street, gets a chauffeur-driven car. I mean, I know it's possible George Cottrell's given him all of these things already undeclared, but why did he take the 5? If he really wants to be Prime, why would you take £5 million? 0345 6060 973. It's 11:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
There's some stuff I haven't... you think I exaggerate when I say I've been away. That National Crime Agency looking at stuff, is that right as well? And then the Financial Conduct Authority? Maybe the answers are obvious. Maybe it's Occam's razor. This just is massive. This is a much, much bigger story than any of the other stories that I thought were really big. We all know how reliable my news sense is. But why do people care? And that's where the Trump comparison comes in. Trump can behave abominably, objectively abominably, His relationship with the truth is non-existent. He will lie and lie and lie again. How come it works for him, but it's not currently working for Nigel Farage? The £5 million gift has been reported to the UK Crime Agency over money laundering concerns. I think I was aware of that, but it's interesting to see it confirmed. The parliamentary investigation will continue if he is re-elected. And there are, of course, various other accusations and allegations landing on an almost daily basis. So why now? 0345 606 0973. The footage, I think, is potentially most telling is the little bit he did about having bought his own spectacles. Can we get that, actually? I'm just looking at the switchboard and wondering whether we'll carry on with this conversation. I mean, to be fair, I'm hardly letting anyone else get a word in edgeways, which is what happens on my first day back from holiday. It's like I've backed up a bit, isn't it? I've got all this sort of waiting to emerge. But the bit, so he went on stage and said, oh, and by the way, I bought my own spectacles. And he had £5 million in his bank account then from Christopher. What an absolute cad. What a rotter. What a mountebank he is. So remember when everyone was pretending that Keir Starmer's spectacles was the biggest scandal since Watergate, including lots of journalists who routinely tickled Nigel Farage's toes. So he turns up on stage and says, oh, yes, and he does that little Alan Partridge, like, top lip quiver. He goes, and I bought my own spectacles, and he had £5 million in his current account at the time. Maybe that's part of the question, the answer to the question that I'm asking. 5 million. Oh, yes. I'm going to join in the witch hunt on Keir Starmer for having spectacles and a suit off Wahid Ali. And I bought my own spectacles. Yeah, well, you didn't buy your own house, did you? Allegedly. £5 million. That's how you know he thought this was going to stay secret. And that's why he's so rattled. And that's why I think it's possible, and remember, I'm just asking questions, that's not the only billionaire to have bunged him a few quid. Andy's in Chipping Camden. Andy, what's going on?
Hello, James. Welcome back.
Thank
You're
you.
on fire today, mate.
You're very kind, Andy.
Brilliant.
You're very kind.
Going back to your comments on Trump, I think Trump gets away with what he does because he pushes this line that it's for the better of America, it's for the best of America, it's in their interest to leave him in power. I think with Farage, if we look at the performance of reform councils, their interest isn't in the good of this country.
Well, nor is Trump's, but if he says it often enough, people can come away thinking that it is.
Yeah, but I think with Reform and Farage, they don't have policies, they don't have any recommendations for the good of the country, and I think people are beginning to realise that what they're doing is deliberately trying to damage the country. I think he missed a trick with the 5 million. He could have gone back to Harburn and said, can you slip me another 5 and I'll donate it all to veterans charities and pay for my own by-election or something like that. But I think with him coming up with all these excuses of showing him to be, the modern personification of Scrooge, if you like, he doesn't care who says what about him.
He thinks he deserves it, doesn't he? Because, as far as I'm aware, he failed in the city. That's why he left.
Oh, okay.
He failed in the city and boasted about how much money you could. That's another clip we should play out more. There's a clip of him when he was in the European Parliament, essentially showing a journalist his receipts and saying, I can claim for this and I can claim for that. So he just jumped on that gravy train, claimed for everything, still going to get a pension.
Yeah.
And he somehow thinks he deserves to be rich, despite never really having done a proper day's work in his life.
Yeah, and I think beneath it all, and similar with Trump, is the fact that he wants to destroy this country. I don't think he even wants to rebuild it in his ideas or his image. I don't even
think he thinks that deeply about it. Putin wants him in power. We can be fairly clear about that. It's a mutual appreciation society. And some fascinating reports today about Putin promoting the immigration narrative that dominates social media in this country at the moment. So it doesn't work in the way that it works for Trump, because Trump keeps insisting that he wants what's best for the country. Yeah, definitely. But Farage can't even be bothered to pretend that he cares.
No, he could have got away with it if he'd have made an effort of, say, donating half of the cash.
Yeah, but then he'd have to admit that he had it.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
I like it. Andy, thank you. Here's the little clip that I was thinking of a moment ago.
Do you like them? Very expensive. But guess what? I bought them myself. How about that?
I don't think you did, mate. Well, prove it. Seriously. Hey, you can spend the money on whatever you want. You can spend it on Ferraris. You can spend it on So this is what he's doing. He's on stage in front of his customers, and he is responding to the story about Keir Starmer declaring gifts from Wahid Ali, including spectacles, by claiming that he buys his own glasses and not telling them. So if you're in that audience, perhaps you can hear yourself laughing. 20th of September 2025, 2024. 5 million quid in his bank account already, claiming to his supporters, that he buys his own glasses when he is not telling them. So if you maybe you can hear your own voice in the crowd laughing at that, because he's laughing at you. These people are so thick, he's saying to himself, that I'm going to tell them that I buy my own glasses without telling them that I've got 5 million quid in my bank off a cryptocurrency billionaire based in Thailand.
Do you like them? Very expensive. But guess what? I bought them myself. How about that?
Guess what? You already had 5 million quid in your bank account that you didn't tell anybody about off a Thailand-based crypto. How about that? Hey? God. Jason's in Bolton. Last word on this. What's it going to be?
Hi, James. First-time caller. Welcome back.
Welcome, Jason.
I think two things happened last week. I think it reminds me of when Boris was in charge, and whilst Boris was feeding the nation and the media, particularly the Daily Mail, etc., with front pages, they kept him alive. But when they realised that those front page headlines were going to run out, that the barrel was going to be empty, they decided, right, it's now our time to take the moral high ground and put the guy down, put into
the Mail never turned on. The Mail never turned on Boris Johnson. They were writing cheques for him to sign up as a columnist almost before he'd got. In fact, I think he breached the rules by signing that contract before he declared it to the parliamentary standards people. But yeah, so go on.
So I think the same is happening again. Say two things have happened. I think they've realised there's probably not a lot else at the bottom of the Nigel Farage barrel of crap, and decided, right, now's the time to deal with it for a few months, create some headlines, and then we'll move on to somebody else after that.
Do you think there's a way back for it? Do you think we could be sitting here 6 months from now thinking, well, he did it again?
I don't think so.
The great unflushable.
I think the mood. I think the Reform voters are now beyond being able to defend him, and I think they've realised now that it is time to move on and let him go on to retirement or whatever he does next. But no, I don't think there's any way to recover. I think the second thing that happened last week, which I find quite amusing, is I honestly think they waited till he went on holiday because they can now turn the mood of the people and claim the moral high ground and say, well, yeah, we found this out first, and James O'Brien was sat on the beach and not able to
playing Tetris. Thank you, Jason. It's coming up to 12 noon. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's funny, isn't it? But nobody is defending him, actually. I've got Jay here applying to go into Idiot's Corner saying, maybe you should change the subject. How about that? What don't you like what you're hearing, Jay? I mean, why would you not enjoy hearing about how absolutely obvious Nigel Farage's weediness and pathetic response to this? Oh, I see. You're still clinging to the carcass of his credibility. And that's the big question now that the British political world will be facing. How many people will continue to cling to the carcass of his credibility when he, more than anyone, has just absolutely shot it to pieces? I don't know what we're going to do next. Should we talk about the weather, do you think? Or something else? Find out after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 4 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. In the spirit of asking, I promise I'm moving on, all right? I am moving on. Eleanor just said, let's talk about the weather a bit later in the week when you've actually experienced it. I said to her, I could probably work out what it's like when it's hot. I don't know that I actually need to have been. I got back late Saturday. Do you know what I tried to do on the aeroplane? I tried to log on to British Airways Wi-Fi to watch the football. I'm going to tell you something, just for future reference. It's not possible to watch live football on even the paid for. You know, when you pay $7.99, I bet you think I fly club, don't you, or business? Oh no, I'm still Jimmy from the block. I pay $7.99 to have access to British Airways Wi-Fi for the entire flight. And I tried. The lady next to me did it. I didn't even think of doing it. The lady next to me did it, so I'm trying to watch it over her shoulder. This is the England game. This is the Saturday night game. And then I think, well, I'll do it myself. And I should have watched hers for a bit longer because it wasn't work. There's no way you're going to get a good enough. What's the word, Keith? It's not a signal. Is it a signal? A good enough feed to watch live football in the air? There's no way that the Wi-Fi is going to be strong enough, especially what if everybody was doing it. So anyway, I digress slightly. But in the spirit of asking questions about the last 2 hours of this conversation, I wonder if there was more to that Coutts Bank story than originally met the eye at the time. It was a very strange story, that. I remember when he was whining about Coutts exercising their sovereignty and taking away his bank account. And now that we know a little bit more about his finances, I just wonder whether it's possible. And remember, I'm just asking questions, whether it's possible that there was a little bit more to that Coutts story than we were told at the time. But at least we know he buys his own glasses. We're going to talk next about a Labour MP who I don't think I've come across before, who has said something relatively uncontroversial, I think, and possibly unnecessary. But the MP for Ashford, Sojan Joseph, has said that we need to distinguish between conditions that prevent work and those who do not. So they focus initially on ADHD, something that I find fascinating, and for, I presume, slightly obvious reasons, of which more later, and saying that if you've got mild ADHD or anxiety, you should not qualify for welfare payments. This is something that he said while chairing an all-party group on mental health. And, I mean, we don't really have the numbers that we need to wade in properly to this conversation. We don't know, for example, how many people who are not prevented from working by a mild mental health condition are receiving welfare payments. My understanding, particularly of PIP, is that it's actually incredibly hard to secure payments in these circumstances. It's incredibly hard to prove to the inquisitors that you are deserving. But of course, in the world that Paul Dacre has built, nobody is deserving. Everybody on benefits is undeserving. But it's the ADHD element of it that I'm interested in, and that there are two reasons for this. The first is that I don't know that I have found, when we find a new subject to talk about together, which happens surprisingly often considering how long I've been doing this job, and we have to keep finding new things to do, for the very simple reason that if we don't find new things to do, we'll be talking about parking tickets and smart motorways every day. So when we started looking into why an ADHD diagnosis was significant, we actually unearthed some frankly extraordinary stories, some incredible stories. And the way that we found ourselves canvassing these stories was a little bit unexpected for me. What happened was, in case you weren't listening, what happened was that people were ringing in to tell me about their children, because that's where the story starts. It starts with children, because these are conditions that didn't really exist, that didn't have names or that didn't have widespread understanding when we were children. If you're anywhere close to my age, dyslexia was still a relatively fresh arrival in the lexicon of neurodiversity or learning disabilities. We didn't know what these things were. Do you know, when I started this job, and I mention this to you every single time that we wade into these waters, and I will continue to do so every single time that we wade into these waters, because it's important to acknowledge wrongdoing, especially your own. In fact, if, like me, you spend a significant part of your professional life acknowledging other people's wrongdoing, it's even more important that you acknowledge your own. I used to be one of those people who dismissed and poo-pooed things like ADHD or oppositional defiance disorder or all of the various other conditions that have now been named by science, I used to dismiss them as exaggerations and nonsense. And I used to mean it. It's important that you know that. I didn't just do it for clicks and giggles. I used to say, well, we just called it naughty in my day. We just called it naughty in my day. And I was naughty. And sort of the age of about 3.5 to 18, 15 years of conditioning had made me think that it was my fault. I had a choice. I was not, I mean, some of the things I did and got into trouble for, of course I had a choice. But I remember the things, I've told you this before, that you do something, almost before you finish speaking, there's a little voice of shame inside you saying, why couldn't you just be quiet? Why have you had to do? You're going to get chucked out of the class again. You're going to get beaten again. I mean, who would choose to be beaten? How could I have not worked this out at the time? So I'm getting beaten again for the second time this week. Put your hand out. All right, thank you, sir. Beaten. And somehow you're also persuaded that it's your fault that you've done the thing that you knew you're going to get. But do you see what I mean? So I used to say, we were just naughty. We used to call it naughty in my day. Whereas actually it is a compulsion. And the fascinating stories came from adults who had only really recognised their own condition, I think that's the best word to use, when their children were diagnosed. So you take your little boy or little girl to have a diagnosis because the teachers had said, I think there might be some ADHD here, or I think there might be some... OCD is a different proposition entirely. But you'd go along and you'd have a chat with an expert if you were lucky, because it's quite hard to get seen, long wait, and they would come away thinking, I was like that as well. So I've got to stop telling my little boy off because he can't help what he's doing. But maybe I need to start being a bit kinder to myself. Maybe I need to start being a bit kinder to myself. Maybe I had this thing. So the second reason why I'm particularly interested in this story is that I think I do. And I know that sort of middle-class media figures self-diagnosing ADHD is both very, very boring and very, very commonplace. So I probably am. I was thinking about it quite a lot on holiday. I probably am going to look into it on a personal level, just to find. That's going to be part of the question that I'm about to ask you, which is it worth doing? If your life is pretty good, if your relationships are pretty strong, if your career is pretty much where you've always wanted it to be, is it still worth doing? Is it worth getting a diagnosis? Interrupting is a thing. I was reading at the weekend. The reason I can't stop which is odd, isn't it, given what I do for a living, but we've got away with it, I think. What's the benefit of getting a diagnosis if things are going all right? Because we always have a conversation about people supposedly getting diagnosed in order to duck out of work or to avoid work. I don't think that's true. Here's what I want to know. What is severe ADHD? Because it must really annoy you. I hope it doesn't annoy you when you hear people like me suggesting that they've got it. You get it with OCD a lot. I know someone who has OCD, and their sister used to get absolutely outraged when people used the phrase in passing. So the boy who had it was pretty chill, but his sister absolutely hated it. So she would be at school and somebody would say, I'm really OCD about my pens, or I'm really OCD about my homework. And if her brother heard it being said, it wasn't quite water off a duck's back, but he had bigger fish to fry. He had more things to work. But his little sister would go ballistic, even at her own friends. She'd be like, you don't know what OCD is. You don't know what it's like. You shouldn't be using that phrase in part. So I've got a horrible feeling that when I sit here and casually say, I was very naughty at school and I interrupt people a lot, I think I've probably got ADHD. That might annoy you. I want you to tell me if it does. I want to know more. I want to understand better. But I also want to know about the gradations. I don't think it's inappropriate or incorrect to talk about gradations, to talk about mild moving through the gears right up to severe. But if it is wrong, I want you to tell me. This is one of those areas where we grope together in the darkness and hopefully end up with a better understanding of everything than we would have had if we hadn't talked about it to each other. So you've got that first bit, which is gradations. What is the difference between mild and severe? The politics of it, I think you're probably going to be less interested in. Does the guy chairing the all-party group on mental health know what he's talking about when he creates an idea picked up inevitably by the Daily Telegraph that loads and loads of people with mild attention deficit hyperactivity disorder are claiming disability benefits? I don't know that that's true. I don't think that it's true, but if you've got the evidence that it is, then obviously I'll change my position on that. It doesn't seem to me to be the single most important element of what is going on, particularly with reference to NEETs. So what are the grades? What are the differences? If you have severe ADHD, how do you feel about people bandying the phrase around now quite liberally to describe much milder symptoms? 0345 6060 973. Number two, very straightforward question. What benefit is a diagnosis? What benefit was a diagnosis to you? Because I don't think you did it for the money. I don't think it's a disability benefit that has improved your life as a consequence of getting an ADHD diagnosis. I think it's something much deeper and something much clearer inside, much more nuanced. But I want you to tell me. 0345 6060 973. And then on a personal level, and I may change my mind about this and exclude you from chapters 7, 8, 9 and 10 of the story, but on a personal level, if life is going well, is it worth getting one? Oh, that's a bit like the second question, isn't it? What benefit was it to you? But just knit the two together, because I'm kind of... can I say it? Yeah, go on then. I'm asking for a friend.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 12. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. You kind of worry what's wrong with people who aren't interested in explanations for things. Well, I do. You know, like I used to be. Oh, get over it. It's just being naughty. It's ridiculous. Why do we have to have a label for everything? And then you hear the testimony of people who have discovered relatively late in life that they have ADHD, or they simply describe a day to you, their mornings, their lives. School refusal is similar to this. The difference between can't go to school and won't go to school. Is it just a desperation to believe that the world is a much simpler place than it actually is? Or is there something? I don't know. We may get onto that a little later. 12:19 is the time. James is in Bristol. James, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James, long-time listener, first-time caller. Thank you for taking it.
You're very welcome.
So I suffer with ADHD. I have done my whole life. I was 29 when I got a diagnosis. And this was just a subject that really touches the heart. So I really wanted to give you guys a call and talk about my experiences with that.
What is I mean, you would say severe, would you, for you?
I would indeed, yeah.
What? I mean, I'm not asking you to prove it, mate. I just wonder what you would point. So I say, he interrupts people a lot and he can't get to deadlines. But I mean, pretty much everything's all right. There's just some stuff that clearly gets easily distracted. What would you file under severe?
So for me, there's a few different things that really I would put myself in a severe category. So for me, it can take me anywhere up to 45 minutes to leave the house in the morning. That's due to, forgetting keys. And then I'll go in with my phone in my hand, pick up my keys, put my phone down somewhere, and then run around the house for 20 minutes trying to find my phone. Being led in bed right up until the minute that I have to get out of bed. I've got a job today that's an hour and a half away from my house. I only got out of bed an hour and 40 minutes before. Rushed in the shower, had a shower, got my clothes on, had a bit of toast, and off I go.
This is brilliant, because I could say, and I would once have said, well, you're just a bit lazy, or you just enjoy being in bed more than other people do. But there's something else going on here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's your internal dialogue in those moments? There's a voice inside you saying you've got to get up, and another voice inside you saying, nah, forget it.
Yeah, it's exactly that. There's a voice inside in my head that's saying, why aren't you getting up? Come on, you need to get up. You know the time's coming up. And I'll watch the clock minute by minute by minute and count down. And then part of me says, no, we've got a bit more time. We've got a bit more time. And it's almost like being frozen in position, unable to move, until it really boils down to that last, the pressure's on now. And that's literally the same as, when I was at uni doing uni work, handing in for deadlines. It would be the night before I'd pull an all-nighter to, finish off a half essay that I still had to do.
I'm like that. And I'm not. I haven't been diagnosed. And a lot of people listening will think that is not evidence of a condition. But what I want to pin down, I'm not one of those people, as you know, or if you don't know, you do now. What I want to pin down is where do we because it's a bit like when I said I used to get beaten at school, James, for doing some of the things that I look back now and think I was not doing. I knew I shouldn't do them, but I did them anyway. I know I need to get up and go to work, but I didn't, like you this morning. Yeah. How would you persuade a complete skeptic that what we are talking about is something other than weak willpower or whatever words they're going to use this week, poor resilience? Oh, here's one. This is from someone called Alex. Oh, for goodness sake, intolerable leftist nonsense. Pull your socks up and stop harking on about the need to be kinder to yourself, which is the greatest evidence you'll ever find of someone who needs to be kinder to themselves. These kids are badly behaved because now both parents work and there's no real disciplinarian. I think they mean discipline. It's another treat me kindly label, like being trans. Oh, bring trans into it. It's like bingo. Parents get their kids diagnosed for extra money so they can buy them a car. So maybe not someone quite as unhinged as that, but a relatively nice person who is sceptical. How do you persuade them that what you've got is medical rather than just behavioural?
So I think anyone spending a lot of time around anyone with ADHD is going to be the best way to convince someone in inverted commas.
Yeah.
I don't think that just by talking to someone, if they have that mindset, I don't think you are going to persuade them. I can only speak from my personal experiences and not anybody else's who may or may not suffer with ADHD, but it's soul destroying. It's life destroying. I would constantly be literally pulling my hair before I got my diagnosis, wondering why I was like this, wondering why I struggled to hold down a job, wondering why I would love a job for a year and then hate it to the point where I couldn't even bring myself to go into work. I think that you really need to spend time with somebody who suffers with it. Some people suffer with it, some people don't. I don't think there is any clear-cut way.
There's no substitute for first-hand experience either. I mean, as a witness, as opposed to a I don't want to say sufferer, but someone who has it. And briefly, because I got a lot of people who want to talk about this. What difference does the diagnosis make? Did the diagnosis make?
It made me realise that there's a reason why. And I think just knowing that there's a reason behind it, it's not just you. I'm very, very, very ambitious. I've always had very big career goals. The fact when someone says, oh, it's just the way you are, or, come on, get out of bed, stop being lazy. Yeah. I think that, when you hear that, and when I would hear that before my diagnosis, it would just stoop you down another 5 levels, 10 levels to how you're currently feeling.
So it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It is just a stop-beating-yourself-up card.
It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card at all. It is exactly as you've just described it. It's just there's an understanding there now. It's not that I'm just really forgetful. It's not that I'm unable to hold down a job for a year. You're talking about the naughtiness at school. I went to a public school and I was always on report there. There was never any kind of, why is he behaving this way? All of my teachers in my reports would say, he's a sterling guy, but, he's naughty.
It's a choice.
Right.
Like it's a choice. Exactly. And you're in work now because you were worried about being late this morning. Have you signed on for any welfare payments?
No, I personally haven't. I know everyone's experience of ADHD is different, and the reason that I haven't is because I've always been in good work. I've always had a good job.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up, I don't know where Dan in Shropshire got the idea that your bills are being paid by tax, but this guy is intelligent and articulate. That's the good news, James. Yet taxpayers are paying for him. That's the nonsense. I didn't think that was true, but I just wondered whether you'd said something that Dan heard and I somehow missed. I wonder whether that's part of the problem here, whether people like Dan hear that you've got a diagnosis and because they read the Daily Mail or they listen to other presenters, they somehow think that means you then get money. Everybody who's got a diagnosis, like that dreadful person writing about people getting free cars. Well, they've got a diagnosis, therefore they've got a free car. I mean, that is unhelpful. I don't know whether it's a small part of the problem or a big part. Thank you, James. And now get back to work. It's 12:26. Doug's in Cambridge. Doug, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. I was just calling in many ways similar to your previous caller, although my experience is slightly different. So I was diagnosed recently. I'm 45 years old, and I would describe myself as someone who's had quite a successful life and career to date. So if anything, I think my ADHD has possibly been an advantage, largely because of the sort of hyper-focus that one can experience. And, my diagnosis for me just made me feel a lot better about myself, one of the features of ADHD is you're often a very harsh internal critic.
Right.
You can set very high standards for yourself and often fail to meet those standards. So it can lead to being very driven, hyper-focused, but also very harsh on yourself. So, for me, it just made me feel much better about less self-pitying.
So that's the phrase. I love the phrase. Be a bit kinder to yourself, because it is even. I mean, even people that don't come across as particularly vulnerable or gentle could benefit from being kinder to themselves. I think we could all benefit from being a little bit kinder to ourselves, and that's what you're describing. It's rather than beating yourself up because of something, you now know that it is not a consequence. It hasn't happened because you didn't beat yourself up enough.
Yeah, it's a curious thing. Like I said, I think for me it's had this incredibly positive effect on my life. It's led to so much kind of energy and drive towards things.
Really?
But that has also led to burnout. So why?
You mean the condition, not the diagnosis? So you've overdone it as a consequence of hyperfocus.
Yes, my particular story is that I was experiencing what I describe as a collapse of function, and I went to see a psychiatrist about this, and they ran a load of diagnostic tests. I wasn't specifically looking for an ADHD diagnosis, and that was one of the things that sort of came out of this process. And then I think that enabled me to look into what ADHD really was, and I was somebody who. Probably like these sound bites that you read in the press about how everyone's pretty useless and gets a diagnosis for the purpose of claiming benefits, etc.
It's so unhelpful, isn't it? Or a free car. Don't forget the free car.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely helpful. I'm completely the opposite of that. And I think this came as a surprise to me, but reading properly about ADHD and the impact of ADHD, both in terms of how you think about yourself and how you interact with the world, it kind of explained a lot. And again, it doesn't, like your previous caller was saying, it doesn't excuse you from doing anything, but it gives you a reason. So and I actually have a son, and it's very hereditary, and I see aspects of his own behaviour, and it helps me kind of understand now that perhaps he's not. I mean, we haven't sought a diagnosis for him at this particular point in time, but
you think
it helps.
You can see it coming.
Oh, you can see it coming, and it helps you. I think it helps you understand that he just has difficulty in areas that other people find straightforward. And
there's something really traumatic, isn't there, about watching children get told off. Whether you were told off or not yourself as a child, when you're in the supermarket or something like that. And this isn't judgment on any of the parents, because I think times change, but a child maybe part of the reason why we find that so traumatic to witness is because we subconsciously are aware that there's no way a child who's pushed a parent to that place has done it on purpose.
Yeah,
do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because I know I did. I mean, my poor mum would have to deal with behaviour that was not off the charts, but sometimes she would lose her rag, and the idea that I would deliberately push her to that position is the logic of punishment. You're getting punished for having done something consciously and deliberately. Getting beaten at school is a punishment because, particularly with the Catholicism that was part of my education, you are sinning, you are sinful, you have done something wrong, and a diagnosis frees you from that. And that must be so invaluable, so liberating. I really must. Thank you. I can feel it now, even if I can't necessarily fully and properly articulate it. 12:31 is the time. Amelia Cox has your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:34 is the time. I just listen. I will absolutely resile. God, that's a great word, isn't it? So, is it a good word or is it a pompous word? I will resile from this position. I'm probably even using it wrongly. I will resile. Do you like that? Is that because sometimes language can be wonderful when you use words that are a bit rare. Sometimes you're just sort of being verbose. You're just using rare words or obscure words for the sake of it, or long words. Do you know there's a word for using long words too much, or a word for enjoying long words too much? Sesquipedalian. I have very sesquipedalian tendencies. Don't ask me to spell it. And you're never going to get it in Scrabble, are you? SESQUIPED or AD? HD, which brings us back to where we were before. Thank you very much. 12:35 is the time. I will resile from this position if the evidence works, if the evidence makes it clear that loads and loads of people with relatively mild ADHD are claiming benefits, and that is the crux of the story. I've got some breaking news for you. I told you we would bring you any information as soon as it appeared with regards to the killing or the apparent murder of Anne Widdecombe, and I can tell you that counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into her death after, and I quote, new information and evidence has come to light, end quotes. That's a statement in the last few minutes from Counter-Terrorism Policing South East. We may try to find out a little bit more about what that may mean before close of play today. If I don't, then I'm sure Sheila will be doing. Time now 12:36. Some breaking news for you if you are just joining us. The Counter-Terrorism Police now leading the investigation into the death of the former politician Anne Widdecombe after new information and evidence has come to light. That's from the Counter-Terrorism Policing South East. 12:36 is the time, which is yet another reminder of why you should just let them get on with their jobs and leave them to it rather than engaging in either online or offline speculation and what would the word be? Trying to make capital or trying to make points out of things before the facts have been established. Back to this conversation prompted by a Labour MP, giving again the impression that loads and loads of people who've been diagnosed with ADHD are finessing it immediately into welfare payments, which I don't think is true. Mark's in Streatham. Mark, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
A bit like yourself, I was very sceptical back in the day before I had before I had my diagnosis. I'd watch Super Nanny and say similar things to yourself. But again, having gone on a bit of a journey of self-discovery, I got diagnosed just before my 50th birthday.
Right, why did you seek the diagnosis? If you don't mind, well, you obviously don't mind me asking, do you? Otherwise you wouldn't have rung in. Always worked, have a very, fingers crossed touch wood, a very successful career in technology. But I always was curious, why do certain things come easy to me and other things that are relatively trivial for most folks are real challenges for me? Like what? Remember, there'll be lots of people listening who don't know any of this. So what sort of things are we talking about?
Well, things like in my job, I travel and have to do things like expenses, and unless there is literally the sword of Damocles / my boss sort of telling me if you don't get this done, you're going to have you're going to have to pay for this out of your pocket. Things like that don't get done. I hate paperwork.
We can't explain this to other people who don't have it, can we? Because they would just presume that there's no way that this is involuntary.
No, exactly. And again, the swan analogy comes up a lot. From outwardly, I'm quite happy, presenting to, multinational customers, all that kind of stuff. But, inwardly, I'm, all over the shop. And I think that's the thing. And the other thing I really wanted to point out is perhaps another way of looking at it is if you do choose to explore this, or anybody who's curious if they choose to explore this, do it for your loved ones.
Go on.
I will. You speak very fondly of Mrs. O'Brien. I feel the same way about my partner. And I think it's, we've been together nearly 40 years. So obviously she sees something in me. But, there are times I annoy the living bejesus out of her, and I'll keep it clean. And I can't help it. And I think,
messiness, being late, poor deadlines, that kind of thing?
Exactly.
Not realising that you should have done something that she thinks is self-evident you should have done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Again, like one of your earlier callers, that if it wasn't for Apple tags, I would have no idea where my keys were 9 times out of 10. And, and she says, have you got your phone? Have you got your keys? Have you got your wallet? And, I roll my eyes at her, but then when I've forgotten them, she equally rolls her eyes at me.
Of course.
And it's like, at least now I know why. I can try my best, and, not like say, 8 times out of 10.
No, of course.
It all works out, but just those other, at least she can understand when I do things repetitively that are silly, annoying, whatever. I'm not doing it deliberately. There is a reason.
Yeah, that's a great line. I'm not doing it deliberately. There is a reason. And that has landed with her, has it?
I think, yes. Well, we're still together, so I think the answer is yes.
No, I know, but we all deal with our partners. I mean, the thing that really annoys me, since you ask, is when you have lost something and somebody suggests that you look in the place where you normally keep them.
Yes.
So everybody has little behavioural tics that may irritate the person who loves the bones of them. But she is now more patient with you than she was before because it's official, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is as well, talking about people asking for, benefits like PIP and so forth. I'm fortunate enough, although I think I scored about a 9 out of 10 on the scale of the type of ADHD I've got. I've chosen. I don't feel I need to make those requests of the state. But by the same token, most people that do, and there are things like access to work as well as PIP.
It's not the money, is it? Often it's the framework of support that can.
100%. And one of the reasons I haven't used things like access to work is I'm fortunate enough that my employer provides a lot of those things, without free of charge, without me having to go, request from those governmental resources. But not a lot of people do. But they can still be working, running businesses and contributing and probably paying more than they take, in inverted commas.
Yes. Yes, I mean, I don't know why that narrative. Well, I do know why, I suppose, because I can see what it creates. It can't be a coincidence. People who just want to shout abuse at people like you, or people like all my callers in the last hour, in the last 40 odd minutes, and that is just as old as the hills, isn't it? It's George Orwell's 2 Minutes of Hate, and we have currently moved into the territory of hating on people with you don't have a diagnosis, you're just lazy, you just don't like paperwork, you just don't want to get out of bed, and you got to really work hard to sustain that prejudice when people are providing you with such compelling evidence that it's more complicated than that. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has posted in the last few minutes on, the platform previously known as Twitter. This morning I have spoken to the head of this is back to the Anne Widdecombe story, the head of counter-terrorism policing. Following new information and evidence, they are now leading on the investigation into the horrific murder of Anne Widdecombe. The police are pursuing multiple lines of inquiry to establish the motivation for this attack. I will be updating the House further this afternoon. My thoughts today remain with Anne's family and friends. That's a statement in the last few moments from the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. The time now is 12:43. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let's go to Hannah. I think Hannah is the first female caller of the day, which, you know how much that irritates me when I don't get calls from women, because there's an idea out there that this sort of radio is male-dominated, and sometimes it is. So thank God you're here, Hannah, in Rabastens in France. What made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, well, it's also a misconception that, ADHD is mostly for boys as well, so it's also good to show that women have it just as much.
Yes.
I called I called in because I was also late diagnosed, same as many people, because of my son. And as I was going through all the boxes going, oh, that's me, oh, that's me, oh, that's me, oh dear. And I got a diagnosis when I was 47, so that was about 7 years ago. And as many of your callers have already said, it's a way of giving yourself permission and self-compassion and understanding that actually it's not just me, and there is a reason behind it.
Yeah.
And I was very interested in this, so I did a whole deep dive and I retrained, and I'm now an executive function coach. And
what is executive function? Because that pops up a lot during these conversations.
Yeah, so your executive functions is basically all of the functions that happen in your prefrontal cortex. And it's like the air traffic control of your mind. So it's where all your time management happens, your emotional control, your working memory, your task initiation. So all of those things happen. And when I'm working with a client, we have a questionnaire, and in fact, ADHD should change its name to executive function disorder. That's it. So, for example, I have a terrible working memory, absolutely awful, can be really debilitating. However, I have really strong planning and prioritizing executive functions.
Okay.
And so when we understand where our strengths and weaknesses are, we can put strategies in to help bolster up the more challenging areas, and also reframe how we work. So we're not lazy, we just have really struggle with task initiation. And when you realise that that's the struggle, it's not because you're lazy, suddenly you can have that extra self-compassion. You can have that, okay, that's my challenge. What can I do to put things in place that's going to help me?
And so you would become more productive as a consequence of but more understanding of your own situation.
Yeah, you're more patient with yourself. So, on my computer, I've got a big sticker that says, oh, well, if it isn't a case of my executive functions not working today.
Yeah.
Because you just
do you have good
laugh
days and
sometimes.
bad days? Do you have good days and bad days? Or is it generally a fairly flat graph?
No, and especially more so with women, because hormones, especially estrogen, massively affects ADHD, which is why most women are not diagnosed until they go through menopause, when the estrogen starts dropping.
I didn't know that.
So, yeah. So, we get it, double whammy.
So if everything in life is going relatively swimmingly at home and at work, would it still be worth doing it?
Would it still be worth doing the diagnosis?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because of the internal dialogue,
100%.
because of the internal dialogues than anything else.
Well, I find one of the most debilitating aspects of ADHD is what we call RSD, which is the rejection sensitive dysmorphia, because neurodivergent children have heard more than 10,000 negative comments more than their neurotypical peers by the age of 12. So this creates a huge level of shame, which is why a lot of high performers are ADHD, because we try extra hard. I always talk about it as a swan. Like you see someone like yourself who's just doing an amazing job, and on the surface everyone sees you doing a great job, but actually underneath the feet are going crazy because of the shame. You don't want to be told off. You don't want to be late again. You don't want to, forget your homework again.
So there's always, there's no possible downside really. Knowledge is power, isn't it? No. In a way, and this is just more self knowledge is more power. How and this is an entirely unprofessional question, and none of us, there's no earthly way we can put a number on it. But and my evidence is always going to be anecdotal. But I am stunned whenever we open this book. Whenever we open this conversation, by the number of people who are queuing up to tell me that they've had light bulbs suddenly illuminate above their heads. Here's one from Karen. I think you're talking about my husband of 43 years. And then she lists all of the usual behaviours: late everywhere, disorder, needs a trawler net behind him at home to catch all the things he gets lost. But he's an amazing helicopter pilot and a technological wizard. I think I'm going to encourage him to get a diagnosis after listening to you and your callers. And I'll get more of those on this subject than almost any other. So how big do we think it is?
Well, I think it's estimation at the moment is sort of 20% of the population is neurodivergent. I don't stick to ADHD because there's so many crossovers with people who have ADHD.
It could be more because the numbers are just responding to the increased knowledge and understanding, which increases the diagnosis. So you sort of find yourself wondering. I always think about school. If you've got 20 kids in a class at school, and you look back and you realise now that one of them probably had this and one of them probably had that, two of them may have had that. I started doing that on weight actually, and thinking back to my school, everybody ate exactly the same diet. It was a boarding school. You didn't get any other food. So if one kid was much more overweight than another kid, it wasn't because he was greedy or lazy or anything like that. There was something else going on, and yet at the time no one realised. Even at a boarding school where you literally get fed the same stuff, no seconds, you get and you do the same physical exercise, and you'd have someone who's as thin as a rake and then someone whose nickname was based upon their size, and nobody really realised at the time that it had nothing to do with what that poor kid has probably grown up with even more shame than the naughty boys. It's 12:50.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:53 is the time. I'm sorry, I've been a bit thick again, haven't I? No excuses, but of course, if they create the idea that everybody with a diagnosis is claiming a benefit as a consequence of getting the diagnosis, then they create the suspicion that people are getting diagnoses unjustifiably. Because the massive majority of people with ADHD diagnoses are not claiming a disability benefit, which means why would you be so negative towards them? So I'm going to be a little bit kinder to one or two of the people being negative or sceptical. But the massive majority, none of the people we've spoken to today are claiming a disability benefit, despite having, in some cases, very severe ADHD. So the negativity comes from the tabloid creation of the idea that they all are. If someone is telling you, my life has been enormously improved by this diagnosis, and your response is to say, well, that sounds like a load of old rubbish to me, you're just lazy, then either you have fallen for the idea that everybody with a diagnosis is claiming a disability benefit and don't deserve them, or you're not very nice. And it could be the other one. But again, if you're not very nice, it's probably because you're not being kind enough to yourself. So you might benefit from some sort of support or even sort of examination. They go hand in hand. I should have spotted that. I do apologise. Of course, the negativity is a consequence of the way that the story is covered, which is why it's so important perhaps to know the numbers. The huge numbers of people who have a diagnosis but are not claiming any disability. I would say probably over 90% or more. I don't know. But anyway, 12:55 is the time. Let's just catch up with Thea Rickard, who is LBC's reporter in the west of England, with these latest developments in the investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe. Thea, what can you tell us?
Well, James, literally in the last few minutes, we've heard counter-terrorism policing and now leading the investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe after, and I quote, new information and evidence has come to light. Now, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, says she's spoken this morning to the head of counter-terrorism policing, and they are indeed leading on this investigation. She says the police are pursuing multiple lines of inquiry to establish the motivation for this attack. She also said says she'll be updating the House further this afternoon. Now, the 28-year-old white British man in custody has also been rearrested, we're told, on suspicion of commission, preparation or instigation of acts of terrorism. Now, as far as we know, detectives are still questioning that man they believe to be responsible for Anne Widdecombe's death. And we're waiting to hear whether he will be charged with her murder and charged indeed with these new charges that he's been rearrested on suspicion of. The 28-year-old was arrested in Rotherham on Saturday evening, and there was a substantial police presence at a house in the Kimberworth Park area of the town yesterday, which we understand is an address linked to the suspect. Today, James, we're seeing CCTV footage released in the press, which appears to show the white male suspect getting into a car in Yorkshire just hours before the attack on Anne Widdecombe. The footage, which is time-stamped at 7:51 on Wednesday morning, appears to show the suspect with a long object protruding from his pocket, although the footage is not clear enough to tell exactly what that is. In a press conference held yesterday, Devon and Cornwall Police said they are not looking for anyone else after Anne Widdecombe was found dead with what's been described as serious injuries at her home on Dartmoor on Thursday morning. But an investigation moving, James, thick and fast, and that news that we've heard in the last few minutes that counter-terrorism policing are now leading on this investigation into the death of the former MP, Anne Widdecombe.
Thank you, Thea, and I suspect there may be more to report in the course of this afternoon, in which case rest assured that Thea and indeed Sheila Fogarty will bring any developments to you too sweet. If you are just tuning in, I can tell you that the investigation into the murder of Anne Widdecombe has now been taken over by counter-terrorism police. That's pretty much the extent of our knowledge at the moment, except for the new information coming to light since the original, or rather the second arrest was made. I'm going to apologise, I think, to Carl and Susanna. I'm doing a lot of apologising today. It'll never catch on, will it? To Carl and Susanna, who are waiting to speak, because it would be inappropriate of me to expect you to squeeze your stories into the next 47 seconds, but I can promise you that we'll return to this territory, partly because I find it more interesting every time. Between you and me, when we stumble into stuff that we haven't done before, and I've been doing the job for so long now that can sometimes seem to be a relatively small category, I find myself wondering, I wonder when I'll start finding it less interesting. I wonder when I'll feel that we've explored all of that, or I wonder when you've started getting a bit bored with something. But with this issue, I just don't. I just find it eternally fascinating, particularly when you think about the percentages and the number of people that probably have conditions like this, and the diagnosis of which will explain elements of their existence that have incredibly far-reaching consequences. So, good news is, bad news is we're stopping for now. The good news is we will absolutely be returning to it in the near future. And that is it from me for today. If you missed any of the show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinions. You can listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits from this show every day. Download it for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, Simon Marks is in for Tom Swarbrick, because Tom Swarbrick is in for Nick Ferrari, but Sheila Fogarty is not in for Sheila Fogarty. She is actually, can confirm, Sheila Fogarty.
I know my place. Here it is. Thank you very much indeed, James.
James O'Brien on LBC.